America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilmember Parrington.
Thank you. Dear God, thank you for the opportunity to gather this evening with this body in a spirit of service to you and to the city of Billings. I pray that you send your spirit to bless our discussions and our decisions for the good of all. Bless each of us here and our families who support us in our endeavors. Bless each of our staff and employees throughout the city, keeping all safe, especially those first responders. Bless all of the citizens in each of their needs. Provide healing and peace in our country, our communities, and families, and in the hearts and minds of all. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Denise, our city clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Shaw?
Here.
Bekowicz?
Present.
Neese?
Here.
Ewald?
Here.
Joy? Councilmember Joy?
Present.
Thank you. Chiriki?
I'm here.
Purington?
Present.
Ronning?
Here.
Boyette?
Here.
Brown?
Here.
Mayor Cole?
Sure. Thank you very much. Our first item of business are the minutes of from our September 14, 2020 meeting. Here I'll remind the council that Councilmember Neese asked for some changes to be made on the set of minutes that were distributed several days ago. And so a revised version with his proposed changes were distributed this afternoon. There's changes on 2 pages, one on page 8 dealing with the discussion involving Park District 1, and then one on page 11 that addressed the ratio of awards from the Downtown Billings Partnership. So we'll ask for a motion relating to the minutes from the September 14th meeting. The only thing I would ask is that you clarify whether your motion pertains to the original version, in which case Councilmember Neese will need to make those request for those amendments, or whether your motion contemplates the proposed changes suggested by Councilmember Neese. So is there a motion? Councilmember Purington.
I propose that we recommend that we accept the minutes as amended by Councilmember Neese.
Okay, that's the motion, and I see a second by Councilmember Ewald. So that's the motion. Is there discussion concerning the motion? If not, we'll proceed. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Could Councilmember Neese just give a little bit of a clarification for the need for the change? Thank you.
Councilmember Neese? And if you do not have your set before you, I do and could read them.
No, I can give you a quick one. The second of the two, that was an easy. It was just it was a mistake, and as far as the number that they wrote down, and so she corrected that. And she thought she had wrote down the correct number. It wasn't, so she understood that. The other, the more complex one was really she didn't capture the question I had. And so she also indicated, actually, she looked like that Andy's answer was actually answering my question, was a question that Mayor had asked. So she clarified that. I believe she must have read through it or listened to it again, and put the correct information down. So it's close enough to what we had discussed that night. She can't do word for word. I think she mentioned it'd be like 87 pages long. So she has to capture those questions in her, how she feels as she counts, and she did a good job. So I just wanted to make sure she clarified that correctly.
So for anybody who's curious, there are 3 sentences that would be changed, and those 3 sentences would read: first, Councilmember Neese stated he supported leaving the Parks Mill Levy reserves at $2 million and using the excess reserves in the Parks Mill Levy to cover Parks costs. And then Councilmember Neese wanted to add the next 2 sentences. Mr. Zeller stated using that amount would impact future projects and the money would have to be raised the following year. And then Mayor Cole asked when council would be presented with the Parks Board recommendation for use of reserves and the CIP. So those are the changed sentences, or added sense by the clerk with Councilmember Neese's input. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, which is approval of the minutes as amended, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all council members. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to council courtesies. I'm just going to begin with 2 hopefully quick items. One is just a reminder that we have a long agenda tonight. I think we have 10 items, which include 9 public hearings. So I will try to limit questions by council members, preferably to 2, maybe with a follow-up, but on 2 different subjects, and ask the people not ask more questions, at least until everybody's had an opportunity on the council to ask their questions if they have any. The second is just a reminder about where we stand with the COVID-19 pandemic. We're now averaging Montana cases over 300 every day. It took us many, many weeks to get to the first 300 in the state, and now we're doing that every day. Unfortunately, Yellowstone County is no exception and is leading the increase. We now have over 3,200 cases that have been diagnosed in our county, and every day we have well above that 25 out of 100,000 that is considered the red zone by Riverstone. Most recently, over the last week, we're at 32.3 cases per day. And so we are in a dangerous situation. It's resulted in 65 deaths in our county. So just continue to remind everybody to do what they know they need to do, which is maintain that social distance, wash their hands, wear a mask when you're in public and cannot ensure social distancing. Thank you very much. Are there any other council courtesies? If not, then we do not have any proclamations tonight. So do we have any council reports from groups that council serves on as representatives that they'd like to bring before us? Seeing no council reports, we have some administrator reports. So Chris Kukulski, our city administrator, it's all yours.
Mayor and council, thank you. So we did receive 3 ex parte communications after 3 p.m. this afternoon. So those are out there. Regarding the regular agenda, item number 6, public hearing, first reading is zone change 983, Cherry Creek Properties. The zoning division received a written request from the applicant's agent to delay the public hearing on this zone change until October 12th. Regular business meeting. The council may grant this request through a motion, and I believe it's a simple majority is what is needed for that. Majority vote. Recommended that the council move for delay immediately after the administrative report. So rather than leave that to wondering late in the meeting what we're going to do there, I'm just suggesting the council consider, if they're inclined to delay upon the request of the applicant to October 12th, that you consider taking that up as soon as I finish this report. Nothing mandates that you do either. I mean, it's ultimately your call. It has been advertised for this evening. I will tell you the October 12th agenda is very full also, so we'll have to do some juggling from the 12th on to the 26th if you choose to move that, which is not a problem. 2 more items on the administrative report. Our next regular meeting will be as scheduled Monday, October 12th. That is Columbus Day. Historically, Billings did have this day off, though many cities in Montana don't do it. That doesn't change the recognition of the day, but we have chosen with a couple of union contracts and non-represented to take the day after Thanksgiving instead of Monday, October 12th off. The intent there affecting the council would be that we stick with a council meeting on Monday night. We don't have to. We can move that to Tuesday if you'd like. But those who've been on the council for a while may recall that for Columbus Week, we traditionally moved to Tuesday. This year, we're suggesting we keep it on the Monday, October 12th. And then last but certainly not least, Brent Brooks has got a special announcement that he'd like to make. So I want to give the floor over to Brent real quickly, Mayor, if I can, before we circle back to talking about that request to postpone the zone change 983.
Thank you very much. Brent Brooks, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Your Honor, and council members. I'll just be real brief. In a letter I sent to Chris last week, I said there's a time and a season for everything. Those of you that are probably vaguely familiar with that, you know that it comes from a highly known and well-respected treatise. I'll just leave it at that. And I have decided, therefore, that I am going to retire from the city on November 30th. And I don't want to spend a lot of your time tonight, but I just thought I would mention that to you. I'm sure there'll be time for discussions later on, and just wanted to let you know that. And it's one of those things that I thought about for a while. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm not very impulsive. And those who are very close to me would say I'm about the least impulsive of just about anybody they know. So I just thought I would mention that to you. And again, I'm sure we'll be talking as that date gets closer, but I just thought I'd let you know because we work so closely together. And it's been an incredibly remarkable and an extraordinary 22 years. And I could go on, but we'll leave that for a discussion at a later time. Thank you.
Well, and Brent, thank you so much. And we will talk more about this, but we wanted you to be some of the first to know on the council after his staff learned it, and obviously decades of service to this city, and then additional, I think, better part of a decade to this county. So I think it's somewhere in the 3-decade neighborhood plus of service, public service to Yellowstone County and the citizens of Billings. So thanks, Brent, for your service.
Thank you, Brent, and we'll make sure we have opportunity to laud you appropriately later. But on the small chance that we were to forget, and because it's such big news, I do want to just echo everything that Chris said. We've appreciated your service over many, many years. Just make sure you don't go away until November 30th, because I'm sure we'll have things for you to do. So again, a long and esteemed record, and 22 years, it probably seems like 39 years or something, but we do appreciate your hard work, and it has been hard work, we know. Thank you again. Okay, unless you got something to top that, Chris, we will move back to our agenda.
Nope, that is it. And then just to recall, Mayor, if you do, it totally your guys' call if you want to deal with that zone change request now or later in the meeting.
I would suggest that we turn our attention then to that request to delay the Cherry Creek zone change 983. I think it's item 3 or 4, item 4 on our agenda. Again, that has been requested. What I would anticipate here is a 2-step process, depending on the wishes of the council. If the council, we can either move it up as suggested by Chris to try to add some clarity to any members of the public who might be watching now, so they don't have to sit around or potentially sit around for a couple hours, or not. To do that, our rules of procedure, specifically section 2-214, subparagraph 15, says that the order of business may be altered for any meeting by a majority vote of the council members present. So the first thing we would do is to vote and determine whether there is a majority who wants to move that discussion up. If a majority wants to move that discussion up, we would then take on the question of whether to delay it. On that, by full disclosure, it's a little unclear what vote is required. Specifically, a 3/4 vote is required to remove an item from the agenda under section 213, subparagraph B. However, the zoning ordinance specifically that talks about what our options are for dealing with a zoning ordinance, which is section 27-1502, subparagraph F, gives the council, when presented with a zone change application, 4 options. 1, approve the application. 2, deny the application. 3, allow withdrawal of the application. Or 4, delay the application for a period not to exceed 30 days. I did have a conversation with Brent earlier today, and I'll let him comment on this more specifically to the extent he would like to. But his thought was that the more specific provision dealing with zone changes specifically that contemplates a majority vote for approval, denial, allowing withdrawal, or delay is what would control here, especially since we're not really removing it from all agendas. We're just delaying it, and hence that 3/4 vote to remove arguably does not apply here. So we would then have a vote on whether to delay, and a majority vote would prevail on that. So before I ask for a motion on whether you want to move up our discussion, Brent, is there anything about my description of the process here that you would like to add to or subtract from?
Your Honor and Counsel, no. In fact, you said it a lot more succinctly and eloquently than I probably would have.
Okay. Well, then we'll ask the council, how would you like to proceed specifically on whether to move it up? I see a couple hands. I saw Councilmember Ewald, Councilmember Shaw. So Councilmember Ewald.
Well, thank you, Mayor. If the council decides to deny the delay, does it go back to number 6 on the agenda then? Or does it still go up above number 1 on the agenda?
Good question. I guess it would depend on how the first vote goes. I guess what I would suggest is that the vote be to move it up for the discussion of whether to delay. But if that motion were to fail, it would go back into its original position and make that part of the understanding from the beginning. Good point. Thank you for clarifying that. Councilmember Shaw?
I would like to make that motion to move it up.
Okay, and with the condition that if the motion to delay fails, that it go back to its original position. Is that
Yeah,
your
you
motion?
paraphrased it exactly right. So
Okay. So that's the motion to move it up in our order to now. But if the motion to delay fails, it'll go back to the original position. Is there a second? Councilmember Chiriki is holding up 2 fingers. Okay, so that's the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion before we proceed to a vote? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Can Brent Brooks advise us on, since I believe there's a valid protest on this issue, whether or not that valid protest has any requirement on the amount of vote that we have to do for this vote or any of the subsequent votes?
Good question, Your Honor and Counsel Member Neese. The short answer is no. Obviously, it would on the merits of the underlying zone change request itself. But in terms of moving this agenda item up to the front of your meeting and moving or voting to continue, the 2/3 protest would not apply.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion or questions relating to the motion? Councilmember Neese?
I would just say, I'm going to not support this motion. I believe that we should go ahead and hear this. It's been well known as far as what the issues are and the topics, and I would like to see us hear this at the actual time of our agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion on the underlying or the motion? Councilmember Shaw.
I'll respond to that just to say that I did really appreciate the initiative that they showed in requesting to move this so that they could address this petition and really try and come up with a solution with the neighbors. So to me, I want to encourage that. I think if they can privately do that, that's a lot better than getting into a big messy zoning battle. So that's why I would encourage us to delay for that reason and that specific amount of time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we will proceed to a vote on the motion, which again, at this point is not on the merits. It's just to move it up for further discussion on the delay issue. All in favor of making that adjustment to our order of business, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the move are council members Shaw, Cole, Joy, Tricky, Boyette, Purington, and Brown and Ronning. If you're in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members Yakowicz, Ewalt, and Neese. So the motion passes. And so we will now move on to the underlying issue about delay. And does council have questions for staff, or is there a motion pertaining to that? Councilmember Tricky.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we defer the conversation about this item until the next business. It's the next business meeting, right? Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the request for delay to October 12th. Is there a second? Councilmember Shaw makes the second. Okay, so that is the motion to approve the delay. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Brown.
So I understood that you have 30 days to do this. So is there objection to even moving it to the 26th? I think Chris made a comment about the 26th might work better than the 14th.
Chris, can you comment? You did say that it was busy, but you also said that we could potentially, if we needed to, move things from the 12th to the 26th. Can you comment further?
Thank you. Yes, the agenda is quite full on the 12th, but I think there are some things within our control we can move. I am curious, thanks for bringing up the subject, whether the applicant has any flexibility, because sometimes I get worried if they give themselves too tight of a time frame, are they going to be right back asking for the same thing in the next week? So, Nicole, could you respond to whether the applicant might want to have the flexibility of the 12th or the 26th fitting within the 30 days rather than boxing us into 1 week or 1 2-week period? Thank you.
Right. As far as I know, they didn't ask to go to the 26th, but if you wanted to, I will let you know that you're going to have 5 public hearings on land use issues for that evening that are going to the Zoning Commission next week. So it'll be all land use all night on the 26th if you move this to the 26th.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that great news, Nicole. We'll look forward to it. Another question for you, Nicole. The county commissioners, although these are not technically related, there's a zone change before the county commission for the northern parcel. They delayed that. Do you know when that will be back before the county commissioner?
They're taking that up on October 6th at their morning meeting. And that is not a continued public hearing. They had their public hearing, closed it. One of the commissioners wanted additional time to read the public comment. He had not had time to read all of the public comment. He wanted to consider that first.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, other questions or discussion on the motion? The motion by Councilmember Tricky is for approval of the delay. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Nicole, do you know when the protest came in? And is the protest any different than a lot of the public comment that has already been addressed during the zoning commission?
The protest petition came in last week on Thursday, late Wednesday, early Thursday. I verified that it was a valid protest. The protest petition itself didn't have a lot of detail about why they were protesting the zone change, other than it would have a significant effect on their property. So I'm assuming that the applicant and agent are trying to discover the more specific reasons on the protest. But the comments that we received on the public comment period and at the public hearing for the City Zoning Commission were not, except for one person, those were not in the protest area, which is limited to 150 feet from the exterior boundary of the subject property.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for staff or discussion on the motion to approve the delay? Councilmember Neese.
I'm sorry, but this is something that Chris had mentioned earlier, that he thought he could move some items to the 26th. Chris, did you realize that we were going to have 5 items and land use items on the 26th, or does that actually fill that agenda up as well?
Council Mayor and Councilmember Neese, no, I didn't know the specifics on the 26th. I know our agenda is very full on the 12th. My request or suggestion would kind of be to maximize that flexibility so that we can work between the two of them and with the applicant. But we do need to fit it within the 30 days. So whether it's the 12th or the 26th, it's going to need to be fit onto one of those two agendas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Tricky.
I'm willing to amend my motion, so giving staff flexibility to schedule it.
Okay, and the second gives her a thumbs up. So I guess what I would interpret that is as a friendly amendment of your own motion to allow either a delay to either the 12th or the 26th in staff's discretion after discussion with the applicant. Is that a fair description of your motion?
Yes.
Okay, I think you all heard that. So that is now the motion, the 12th or the 26th with discretion staff after discussion with applicant. Further discussion on the now amended motion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. So all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are council members Shaw, Joy, Chiriky, Carrington, Brown, Ronning, Cole. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are council members Boyette, Yakowicz, Ewalt, and Neese. So the motion does pass by a majority of 7-4. So that's it. So that will be delayed. A brief comment to any members of the public who might be watching and wanted to comment. Because it's no longer on our agenda, you will not have an opportunity to comment. There won't be any sort of public hearing on item number 4. However, since it's not on the agenda, and if you are not available on either the 12th or the 26th, whenever that might get scheduled, I guess it's a non-agenda item, and you'll have an opportunity at the very end of our meeting. Apologize, it could get late, but we hope not, to give your comments in 3 minutes then, if you would like to. No obligation. We will again have a public hearing on either the 12th or the 26th, and we will not. Well, I don't know how we would allow multiple comments, but I guess we almost have to, because it would be separate from the public hearing. Okay, with that, we will then move ahead to public comment on non-public hearing items on our agenda. So this is only item 1, our consent agenda tonight. If you would like to be heard on items 1A through item 1F, this is your opportunity. Please call the call-in number, which is a Montana number 237-6196. I would recommend you write that number down for all items tonight because it'll be the same number, 237-6196. Please call that number now if you'd like to be heard on any item under item 1, our consent agenda. That agenda is available on the city's website. If you just Google City Council agenda and look for this date, September 28th, you'll find that agenda. And you can call that number now. You'll be put in a queue and asked to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and give us your name and your address. There is a delay, so please turn off your computer or the television so you're not confused. Our meeting is ahead of what you are hearing. Denise, has anybody called 237-6196 for public comment on non-hearing items?
No, Mayor, I have no phone calls.
Okay. Again, that number for future reference, 237-6196. We'll proceed then to item number 1, our consent agenda. Are there any separations requiring a separate vote by any council members? Councilmember Brown.
Sorry, couldn't get unmuted. I will be abstaining from 1F1.
Bills for the week of August 24th. Thank you very much. Any other separations by any council member? Any separations? Councilmember Yakovich.
Your Honor, I make a motion.
Please.
To approve, except for item F1.
Okay, motion is for approval. Is there a second? Councilmember Ronning? Discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Approval, item number 1. Councilmember Neese. Councilmember Neese, I'm sorry, did you have a motion, or I'm sorry, discussion on the motion?
I'm sorry. This is just a question for regarding the bids.
Go ahead.
I've noticed several of the bids are just one bid and we're accepting those bids. Is there anything we're doing or should be doing to maybe help increase the competition amongst the bidding on this? Is there, I guess we advertise in Yellowstone County News and on the website, but it seems like I've seen this quite a bit where we're only getting one bid or we have to reject bids, things like that. So is there anything the city, Chris, I don't know if you know what we can do to help increase the amount of bids we're getting?
You know, I know commonly we'll also reach out to contractors or suppliers. When the staff sees that, it concerns us. So then we end up looking at, okay, what are past prices? What's kind of market pricing? And then that's when we make the decision to recommend to you, yes, let's accept this bid. Or you'll also recall, we will recommend rejecting a bid if we don't feel like we've got competition. So sometimes they're kind of specialized or folks are not, aren't bidding our prices. So we're always looking at ways to get those numbers. And I assure you, even though we get one bid, we don't just accept it outright. We want to look and see what the market is for a particular piece of equipment.
Thank you, Chris. Oftentimes the staff memo, when we only get one bid, has a statement that the staff has determined that this is a fair price. It's kind of a conclusory one sentence. Often there's a reference back to the budget and saying that the bid price is less than what was budgeted, which of course is very helpful and valuable. I just wonder if staff might want to give some consideration to providing a little more detail about why they think it's a fair price. Those examples that you just gave might help the council feel a little bit better, that we understand why it's a fair price when there's only one bid.
No, thank you for those suggestions. And we'll talk about that at tomorrow's staff meeting. We continue to kind of talk about memos. I think that's an excellent suggestion to make sure we're getting. Sometimes we make an assumption you have information you don't have in the public, and that's a really good idea. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion on the motion for approval of item 1? Okay, if not, all in favor of the motion with the one exception of 1F1, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all council members. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Is there a motion or discussion relating to item 1F1? Councilmember Boyette.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve item 1F1.
Is there a second? Councilmember Purrington. Discussion on the motion? Is there any discussion? Councilmember Neese.
I assume that's recommended approval with Sean Brown abstaining.
Yes, absolutely. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the motion are all council members with the exception of Councilmember Brown, who abstained. That then concludes item number 1. We'll move on to regular agenda item number 2. Denise, would you read regular agenda item number 2?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing to receive input on the city's FY 2019-2020 draft comprehensive annual performance evaluation report, the CAPER, for Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and home programs. No action is necessary this evening.
Thank you very much. Brenda Beckett is our presenter. I assume we can turn it over to Brenda. Is that correct, Chris?
Sorry, Mayor. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Brenda, it's all yours.
Great. You have a huge agenda, so I'm going to keep this very, very short. I just have a few slides for you. So today we're taking comments on our last year for Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership funding. This is actually the 5th year of the consolidated plan is implemented. You approved the new consolidated plan earlier this year, so we'll look at the next slide. I think we will. Yeah, great. Oh, wow. It smooshed it. Weird. Well, I just want to give a shout out to also the Community Development Board. The majority of those members represent low-income areas, so they're really integral in helping us determine how to expend funds and how to direct all of the federal resources that we receive. So our 5-year impact, 289 families achieved home ownership. We did home repair on 21 homes. We purchased 5 homes that were foreclosed during this period of time. I know there was some interest in the foreclosure program earlier this year, so we've developed a foreclosure program overview. It's in your council packet as a PDF. It should have has great information about the averages, average purchase price, that kind of thing. So I think you'll enjoy taking a look at that if you're interested. We also have 4 homeownership units that were developed by NeighborWorks Montana over this last 5 years, and 2,700 people were assisted through the AmeriCorps Vista anti-poverty programs. Okay, next slide. Yeah, this is terrible. You guys can't see anything.
If you want to go back to the slide that shows the other little slides, there you go. Now we can, it's smaller, but we can see the whole slide.
Huzzah. Well, I can also send you the PDF. We can send it out to everybody. So this is a great slide that just kind of shows the leveraging impact of the Billings Metro Vista project. We have invested over the past 10 years $435,000 in tiny little increments like $50,000 or $75,000. And that has returned almost $4.7 million in member services and administration. Those are direct grants to the city to implement the program, including staff time. So that's a 1-to-11 ratio if you look at it on its own. For Vista fundraising, we've had 262 members this year, or up to this year, serving at 55 organizations. It always surprises me that we get new host sites every year. So that's tremendous for us. They've generated almost $4.9 million. Again, that's a 1-to-11 ratio. The total project value, just from that perspective, is over $9.5 million. It's a 1-to-22 ratio. So whenever you look at community member investment, our Vista members do receive a living allowance. It's about $1,000 a month, and they need to pay everything with that. Their, the rent, utilities, their food, everything. and they have invested $2.4 million in the Billings community, and that separated out as a 1.6 ratio.
Hey, Brenda, if you go up to your display settings, it might be that you are showing it as a portrait view when it's really a landscape, and it might be as simple as that.
That's my helper there. Wyeth Friday is helping me with the view. Yes.
There, looks great.
Okay, perfect. All right, so next slide. So I'm just going to end it here because you have a huge agenda, but I did want to point out that our Vista members are nationally renowned, and this is just from the AmeriCorps Vista Facebook page. And then I received this email from Carly, our grants tech that manages the Vista program, and she said when the director of Vista likes or follows our Facebook page. So we're pretty excited that that the head of Vista actually followed us a few days ago. So Rachel is from Billings, Montana. She's seen on the left, and she's featured in a pinned post at the very top of their page. So she shows up first anytime anybody lands on that page. And then our other Vista members have been recently highlighted. I just picked a few of them because there's a lot of them online, and so they've also been highlighted. So I'll just end with those kind of positive notes. Mm-hmm.
That's great, Brenda. Thank you for the great work you do and all of the Vista workers and the great attention you're bringing to Billings.
Mm-hmm.
Are there questions for Brenda? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I don't have a question. I would just express my appreciation for the hard work that the board and everyone does on the CBD, and I think they have such a passion for housing. They don't think of this as just a house that someone else is going to own, but they really put themselves into it, and the photographs of before and after really are evidence of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge Brenda and her team also and share that I often watch their meetings, which I'm so thrilled that you Facebook stream them live. And the meetings are always so efficient, so much information gets packed into what you present. And I just always leave a meeting feeling so well informed and proud of my community. So thank you so much, Brenda, for all the work and all the work that your entire team does. Really.
Thank you so much. That credit really goes to our board members. They're amazing. They're absolutely amazing, and they're not afraid to tell us when we're kind of veering off track or they have other ideas. So they're absolutely outstanding people. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else before we go to a public hearing on this item? No action is required, but we do need to have a public hearing. Anything else? If not, we'll open it up for a public hearing. That phone number again, 237-6196. If anybody would like to be heard on this item number 2, call 237-6196. There is a bit of a delay, so please turn off your television or your computer, or you'll be confused. While we're briefly delaying to allow for that delay, any other questions for Brenda? Denise, not seeing any. Denise, do we have anyone who is called 237-6196? 237-6196.
No, Mayor, I have no callers.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me know if you hear something in the next few seconds. If not, anything else from any of the council members before we move on to item number 3? Anything else from any other council members? If not, we'll give a little hands up. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Brenda and her team. Okay, we'll move then to item number 3. Denise, would you read item number 3?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing and first reading ordinance for zone change 982, a zone change from residential professional RP to residential multifamily RMF, on block 4, lot 4 through 8, Sunset subdivision a 39,793 square foot parcel of land, generally located at 1127 Alderson Avenue. 1127 Alderson Avenue, LLC is the owner. Michael Burke is the agent. Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 criteria. Action this evening, approval or disapproval of the Zoning Commission recommendation.
Thank you very much. We'll turn it over to Karen for her presentation. Karen.
Thank you. A zone change 982, just the surrounding zoning here. It's in a diverse area next to Grand Avenue is community commercial. There's also community commercial to the west. We have some residential multifamily restricted to the east, and to the south we have residential 7,000. As you can see, the area is diverse, as I stated. The property to the west is an apartment complex existing. There is commercial development to the north along Grand Avenue, and then to the east is the Albertsons Shopping Center. Some photos for you. This is a subject property. The proposal is to renovate the existing office building and create residential apartments. 29 units are the proposal. This is looking south across Alderson to the west and to the east. And just a note, these photos were taken on a Monday afternoon at about 3 p.m. This is the existing parking area that would be upgraded and modified with fencing and landscaping. This is all off-street. This is looking east on the alley. They have a few more spots behind the structure off of the alley for parking. And this is looking west on the alley. There is a valid protest petition received for this property. In the event of a valid protest, property owners with 150 feet from the property included in the change are included in that petition. 25% of those property owners must sign the petition in order for it to be valid. With 19 properties on this particular situation, that would mean they needed 5 signatures from property owners, and they have 6, which creates the valid protest. And in a valid protest, the city council members available at this point are our entire council. 2/3 of the present voting members of the council would need to vote in favor of a motion to approve in order for it to be approved. The Zoning Commission received letters prior to City Council, but in total at this time we've received 11 in opposition, 2 emails, 2 letters, and 7 form letters signed by different property owners. Their primary concerns were items 3, 4, 6, and 9 of the criteria. The primary concern was public health and safety, welfare of the residents living in the area, their concern with increased traffic, decreased on-street parking, as well as a possible decrease in property values. The Zoning Commission has held their public hearing and is forwarding a recommendation of approval based on the review criteria. It's designed in accordance with the growth policy. It promotes public health, public safety, and general welfare. The additional dwelling units would increase the number of ratepayers in the utility system. The proposed design will provide secure off-street parking and limit traffic crossing the properties. It would facilitate adequate provisions of transportation. The transportation calculations provided by the city traffic engineer. It was after the city zoning commission hearing, but in contact with our traffic engineer, their calculations for a commercial office at this location with this gross floor area would indicate 279 trips per day, as opposed to 193 trips from residential apartments. The effect of motorized and non-motorized transportation, the traffic generation from 29 dwelling units would increase the vehicle trips per day. Currently, the property is vacant, so yes, it would increase the vehicle trips to that property. And lastly, it would promote compatible urban growth. The proposed zoning will allow this parcel to redevelop into a housing need that is compatible with the existing neighborhood. It promotes urban growth, and approval of the zone change will conserve the value of the property, allowing redevelopment and renovation of the existing building. We have also received 2 letters and 1 phone call supporting the zone change, as well as the applicant's response to the surrounding property owners' concerns. All of that printed information was provided for you. Again, the City Zoning Commission is forwarding a recommendation of approval based on the determinations of the 10 criteria. This is a site plan showing their proposal. Adding the 29 units into their existing building and upgrading the parking. They provide fencing on the west and north side of the parking area to prevent vehicles from traveling through from the commercial areas, as well as landscaping and lighting, and a safety fenced area across the front lawn area on Alderson Avenue. That concludes my presentation. I do know that the applicant's agent is available. He has additional information that he would like to provide for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Karen, would you like us to give you questions now, or would you like the developer's presentation first?
It would probably behoove you to listen to the developer. He may answer some of the questions that you have for staff.
Okay, we'll do that. Do you have any idea of the length of time? Is this... this is from Michael Burke, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. We'll just turn it over to Michael. You're there. It's all yours as long as your presentation's measured by minutes instead of hours. Is that a safe assumption?
Good evening, Mayor.
Yes.
Yes. So I've got Jeff Winkler here from my office and Max Griffin, the representative for the owner of the property, and I'm going to let them present. And yes, we'll be as brief as we can be.
Well, if it's okay, I'll start. I'm Max Griffin. I've owned that building for about 15 years. We also own the property directly to the north, 1116 Grand. And until recently, we owned the AutoZone property, which is to the northwest of that property. During the 15 years we've had that building, it was Indian Health Service was there, as well as a call center. A little over 2 years ago, the last tenant moved out, and we've been working diligently to fill it, sell it, do something with it. And then COVID kind of put the final nail into the office market for us. And so we did some research, and we found out that there's a great need for affordable workforce housing in Midtown. There is not any right now that's available. In fact, the market is extremely tough on all parts of the apartment market. I sent a letter from Rainbow Properties along with that kind of gave their position on that. And so what we're trying to do is we're going to convert that building into 29 units. There'll be 12 studio apartments, 15 one-bedrooms, and 2 two-bedroom units. 8 of those units are at ground level, no steps. The others are all served by an elevator that's currently in the building. We listened to the neighborhood and what they had to say, and we tried to address all of their concerns that we possibly could. The fencing that Karen was talking about, we're going to fence the alley off on the backside of the parking lot, so there's no through traffic that comes through AutoZone. Nice thing about it's nice to have AutoZone there, but they have semis that come through that area, and it's easy to cut through our parking lot. We're also going to fence the entire front of the building and most of the rear of the building for kids, so they can have a safe place to play out there. We're really trying to target the safety issues that the neighborhood was concerned about. We'll have electronic entry doors, cameras, systems inside and outside, as well as parking lot lighting for the enclosed parking lot as well as around the building. I know there's been some concerns in that neighborhood of people moving through there that shouldn't be, and so we're going to try to control that. That neighborhood, like I said, I've been a part of that neighborhood for a long time. It's in a transition area from commercial to residential. And in that 300-foot area there, we have a 24-plex, a 4-plex, 8 rental properties, and 12 commercial properties, including the Grand Center, the 7.73 acres to the west of it. Of the 35 property owners in that zoning, only 11 are actually owner-occupied units. And one of the other big concerns from the neighborhood was what Karen mentioned, was traffic, that we're going to increase the traffic flow. Under the current RP zoning that we're under right now, we're required to have 60 parking spots, and that would make 279 daily trips as a office building. Under the RMF zoning, we only are required to have 29 parking spots. We have 44 parking spots, and that will only generate 193 trips per day. So that's a 69% reduction in the trips per day, going from the zoning that we are to the zoning that we want. And then if we can pull up the share screen, if you notice on Karen, she said that was 3:30 in the afternoon. We went back and took shots periodically through the day over a 3-day period to really find out what the parking issue there was. And can you see this one all right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so this is 9:23 at 8:30 a.m. This is 9:23 at 2:20. This is 9:24 at 8:30 a.m. This is 9:24 at 2:06. This is 9:24 at 6:16 p.m. We were trying to pick up the evening parking there. And this is 9:25 at 7:58. We were trying to catch, other than the grill of my truck there, we're trying to catch just how many people are probably still not gone to work yet. So we don't think there's a big traffic problem as maybe what's been stated. And we're certainly going to try our best to eliminate that. You can jump out of that, Jeff. By offering 44 spots where 29 are required. After hours parking, they can park in our lot at 1116 Grand to the north there with no problem. That whole building shuts down at 5 p.m. And so the only issue that we haven't addressed is there's a lot of concern about crime and activity in the neighborhood. And we're concerned about that too. We have to make sure our tenants are safe and protected, and we have to make sure that we do our part to protect the neighborhood. And that's really what we're striving to do with the cameras, with the area lighting, with requiring our tenants to park in the parking lot. You can never tell somebody they can't park on a public street, but we can certainly have provisions to allow them to do that. And I guess the bigger picture for me is that we have a vacant building, and that doesn't help the neighborhood any. The chances of getting that to rented as an office building is going to be long. It's not going to happen overnight. But we have the opportunity to really provide some workforce housing, to provide in a neighborhood that doesn't have any that provides all the services that are needed for people to live without having to drive everywhere. And so that's the big reasons that we're trying to go forward with this. And so we just ask that you can support us and approve this zone change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael, anything else from your group there?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Then back to council. Council, this is your opportunity for questions. I'd suggest you try to keep it to questions to staff and to the developer, and then we will move on to a public hearing and then come back to council for discussion. So Councilmember Boyette. Councilmember Boyette, you are muted.
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of like Councilman Brown there. For the developer, a couple of questions. One, what would be the basic cost for a studio apartment and a one-bedroom? And then second of all, by having studio apartments and one-bedrooms, are you really looking at adults, one adult or two adults, and maybe not a lot of children that would cause issues? Just observation.
Yeah, I don't think we're really targeting a large children group, but we are really targeting young couples, elderly people who need those services that are close by. Workforce people. If you've got it right now, starter home costs $200,000. You got to have a job of $42,000 to be able to afford that. Our goal shooting right now is $695 for a studio. $825, I think, for a one-bedroom, and $1,275 for a two-bedroom. And all our units, especially the studios will all have Murphy beds, because we're trying to address a need in the community that people can move in without having to pack all their furniture. They'll have washers and dryers in each unit, full kitchens with microwaves. So we're really trying to target a market that's been not very well serviced by the community. If you want a studio apartment in town right now, you got to go in somebody's basement. So that's really the need we're trying to fill.
Follow up, Mayor?
Sure.
I've driven that many times. That alley is behind the building. It's pretty beat up. Do you know if you would be required to do anything with the alley, or would that be a city itself?
Well, we've tried for years to get the city to participate, but they haven't. But we would certainly participate in that, because I think it's horrible. We have one to the north, and we had one to the west just until recently. It is pathetic.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for staff or developer? Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge all the emails that we've been receiving. We got several today, and I did ask people to give their name and address, and there were a few of those that do not live in the area. So I think they were probably petitioning for someone else, but I just wanted to acknowledge those. Some of the questions that I have was, and I'll just ask them, will there be an on-site manager for the apartments? Is there access to the building from the north side? And it looked like in your pictures that you had, Max, that the parking that's on the north side, street parking, looks to be primarily the Gin Mar. I would imagine that it's the apartment building parking, which did surprise me because driving over there yesterday, they do have covered parking in the back. So I don't know if there's any way to restrict that on-street parking, which, like you said, it's public street, so I doubt you can. But anyway, those are kind of my questions. And then I noticed there's quite a space between your building and the Gin Mar. Are you going to fence off that, or whose property is that between the two buildings?
Well, it's a little bit of theirs and a little bit of ours, but our intention is to really have fenced about 270 degrees or more of the property. And when we're talking about the alley, if you notice on the plan, that's the loading and unloading zone back there. That's right, the direct access to the elevator. We wanted to make sure that we weren't having loading and unloading out in the street on Alderson. So that's why we came up with that. And that's another reason for the fence, is we discourage that by the fence in itself for those people to be loading and unloading. The problem with Janmar is they have 17 parking spots covered, and you saw that, but they have more units than that. And this is one of the first projects I've ever had where I've had 147% of the parking that I was required. And so we don't think we're going to be a problem. And we will certainly, notify all of our tenants that we want them to park in there. And we certainly want to allow any storage of any trailers or anything like that on site. Did I answer you?
Yeah, so Max, thank you very much. Councilman Princeton, also I asked whether you had an on-site manager and whether there'd be access from the north.
The access from the north, there is an access to the north that for the loading area, and that will get you also to the parking lot at 1116 Grand. No on-site manager.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for staff or the developer, Councilmember Purington? Or I'm sorry, Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. So I used to live in Janmar Apartments, and you're absolutely right. There's not enough parking that goes with those apartments than there are the same units. So I always had to park on the street in the front when I lived there. But my question is for either Chris or Andy or Kevin, or maybe it's for the developer. But one of the concerns that the residents in that area have stated is that they believe that their property values will decrease if there is a apartment complex that's added. Can one of you address that if there's knowledge of that, or if that will happen, or if no one knows if that will happen? Can one of you address that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Why don't we start with staff? I don't know whether Wyeth or Karen want to jump in, and then if the developer wants to comment, they can do so. Wyeth or Karen, can you comment on that?
I do not have any kind of detailed or specific information on property values. I would have to defer to a professional appraiser in order to get specifics. Wyeth may have some more input on that.
Mayor and Councilman Ronning, yeah, I guess I'm in the same situation in terms of that kind of detail on property value and those kind of analyses. We don't have anything like that in this kind of detail for the area.
Thank you very much. Chris Kelsey looked like wanted to comment, and then we'll go see if the developer has comment.
My only addition is extremely broad, as was pointed out. If we don't have the actual impact data from appraisers, over the years often seen concerns of density automatically negatively impacting property values. What I perceive is it's all based on quality. So density isn't nearly as impactful as the quality of what's being built. But I can't speak to the quality of this project and wouldn't try to, but for folks who make an assumption that density automatically means property values will reduce, I think the evidence will show you, based on just market values, that you can pay a lot for condos, townhouses, or apartments, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The question was also posed to the developer. Does the developer want to comment briefly? And Councilmember Ronning, is that okay if we ask? Okay, yeah.
Well, I think right now, if you look at that neighborhood, and we've maintained that exterior of that building the whole time that it's been empty. I mean, we've sprinkled, we water, we maintain, so that we're trying to hold the integrity of the neighborhood. But right now, you'll have another zone change coming up in a few weeks for the corner of 12th and Alderson of a repo property that is going to be asking for a zone change from a duplex to a triplex. There's that property. There's another one midway down the block that's in rough shape. The property owners that live there take really good care of their property. but there's such a rental market there that quality isn't up to property owner standard. I believe if we build a good project, a well landscape maintained project, we will help the neighborhood. In my opinion, that if we go in there and just put trash and garbage in there, we're going to hurt the neighborhood. That's not our intention. You can see that from the plan. And I think you can see our intent of what we're going to do there. It's a tough situation because you've got on Alderson across the street from us, you got 6 older people who've lived there for a long time, and all around them is rental properties. Now, there's not much we can do about that, but we can make sure our project is up to the standards that they would want.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for staff or developer before we go to public hearing? So I'm not seeing any. So for anybody who's listening, the phone number to call for the public hearing is 237-6196. Go ahead and call that number now. We will open the public hearing. Just a reminder, again, that number 237-6196. And while we're waiting for those calls to come in, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to disclose that I did receive a phone call from a gal on this. We did not get into specifics. She simply just stated the same things that were in her email. So I just wanted everybody to know that.
Thank you very much. And as was mentioned before, we have received a lot of emails, probably exclusively in opposition today. So for anybody who's interested, they would want to look at those emails as well. Anything else? A reminder to anybody who's calling in at 237-6196 that our actual meeting is ahead of what you're hearing. So it's important that you turn off your television or your computer. Councilmember Tricky?
Like Councilmember Brown, I received a phone call and it was basically the same kind of information that we were getting from emails and whatnot.
I did too, probably from the same person.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette.
This is for the developer. Just a side comment. I drive that property 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, and for the last 10 years, and I want to compliment them at the very least for maintaining it as it's been empty. They could have let it run down with weeds and stuff, but I just want to compliment how clean it is. That's just my observation by driving past it multiple times.
Thank you very much. Okay, Denise, do we have anyone who has called? I'm sorry, Councilmember Joy, you raised your hand. No, okay. Denise, do we have anyone who's called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I have no calls.
Okay, I think we've given plenty of time to catch up, so we will close the public hearing and proceed on with council discussion. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Having conducted a public hearing considering written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve Zone Change 982 and adopt the findings of the 10 criteria as recommended by the Zoning Commission.
Thank you very much. Is there a second to the motion? I see a second by Councilmember Chiriky. Okay, the motion is for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation and the findings of fact. A reminder, because there is a positive protest, this would require a 2/3 vote to pass. Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honored Council. I received a number of calls, but my answering machine took care of them. And then I saw a lot of letters too. If I was to oppose this, I would oppose it because of my frustration of landlords who are not doing a good job. So I echo with the residents who are concerned, and I even appreciate the developer pointing out that there are those who don't take care of their property. It's really frustrating. And I cannot question the integrity of the developer or the architect. However, if I'm going to oppose this, it's only because the voice in the community is legitimate. The worry is legitimate. And with all those many landlords who are not responsible, it really undermines the confidence and the safety and security of a neighborhood. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to support this. I've kind of kicked it around for a little while, but these property owners have taken the initiative to keep the property up, keep it maintained, even when it's empty. So I would have absolutely no fear that they wouldn't do the same, once they've got it renovated and doing that. The other big issue for me in all of this is the fact that they've got like 140% of the parking required. So I really don't think that the on-street parking is going to be an issue. And the traffic, really, if they're coming off of Grand, I mean, they're barely headed down the street really before they hit the parking spot. So I think that they've done that. And again, I think that their current integrity, their current status of keeping things up to date speaks to the fact that they're going to watch the crime. They're going to try to keep that down. Now, if they sell it, that's a whole different deal. But I think at this point, I feel comfortable supporting this with the builder that's on board. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you. Yeah, I echo what Sean said. When I looked at the site plan, it seems so well thought out, and the perspective of the parking. When I looked at the pictures that were provided to us regarding the different times that the parking was photographed, what it looks like in the pictures is that the majority of that parking is right in front of the Janmar apartments. And from what I could see in those pictures, it does look like perhaps the tenants from Janmar are parking, but it seemed as though they were parking right in front of the apartment building. It didn't seem as though they were parking across the street or down the street, but really right in front of the Janmar apartments, which I guess as someone who lives in a house, when friends come to visit me, or if we have to have a parking issue at my house, we park right in front of our house. So I guess a homeowner would do that as well. But I agree with Sean, listening to what the developers had to say, and same with Sean and same with Mike. I drive by that particular property quite often, and same thing, that building has sat there empty, but it still looks nice. We've got a lot of buildings that have been empty for a long time that don't look even a fraction as nice as this. So if that is any reflection on how this particular developer plans to move forward with this project, I think it's a pretty good reflection. So I too am going to support this, and want to acknowledge all of the letters and calls that came in. Definitely heard them, definitely listened to them. And I guess also would want to comment that this is commercial property, and it could be something a whole lot different that goes in there. And so just to caution the residents there that it could be, if that developed into some type of business, that could be really heavy duty, all types of traffic at all different hours of the day. So kudos to the presentation tonight and the thought put into this development. So it has my support.
Thank you. Other discussion on the motion? Councilmember Treaky.
I would like to add 2 additional reasons why I support this. One is that neighborhood is in change. There are 2 different things that are going in different directions as owners move out, as the ownership of properties move out of state for the residential properties. That is a problem. But what's also happening is that there's more and more empty commercial space in that area. So yeah, I think this is exactly the kind of project that will really help that neighborhood. And I would also point out that that neighborhood right now is currently the most walkable neighborhood in the city. And this would just add to that. The other thing that I want to say is that I really do want to support local business owners, local property owners who are pivoting their properties from a business that isn't working into something that is working. So basically they're taking their building and saying, hey, we don't have commercial need anymore, we have residential need, and they are doing what they need to do in order to do that. So I very wholeheartedly support this project.
Thank you very much. Other discussion on the motion? Councilmember Shaw.
It's going to be very fast. I want to say I also will support this. I just wanted to add to all the reasons. And for any other developers out there listening to this discussion, the number of studios and one bedrooms that are going into this is really an important piece to me. I feel like that's a huge need in Billings. We really don't have enough one bedrooms and studios. So just kudos. I think that was a good choice. And I agree with everything that's been said. So, but for other developers, we need more of this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Other discussion? Before we proceed to vote, Councilmember Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot I like about this neighborhood. Like Danny said, that is a very good walkable neighborhood. My daughter lived in that neighborhood and she enjoyed that. There's shopping right next door. I think the developers is doing a good thing there. Although I have concerns as Councilman Yecker, which indicated that residential or rental property sometimes is not cared for. And this developer, I believe, converting this, from residential professional to this RMF will be a good thing initially. I just hope that they continue to own it and operate it that way. When we change the zone, it doesn't mean that they have to maintain it like that. It could be all torn down, and then the parking wouldn't be as big. So, but I believe that neighborhood is a good place to put residential like this, and I hope that type of affordable housing is maintained there going forward in the future if it is ever sold or redeveloped into another development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on the motion? I think we're getting close to a vote. This is your last opportunity. Anybody else want to comment on the motion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval consistent with the staff recommendation. Reminder requires 2/3 vote, which will be 7.3 council members. So whoever the 0.3 is, just raise two fingers. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are council members Shaw, Joy, Chiriki, Boyette, Purington, Ewalt, Ronning, Brown, Neese, and Cole. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Councilmember Yakowicz. Motion passes by the required 2/3 majority, 10-1. Thank you very much to council members, the public who provided a lot of input, and the developers. Brings us then to item number 4 again has been moved. So we are now on item number 5. Denise, would you read item number 5?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing and resolution adopting annual Special Improvement Light Maintenance District SILMD assessments for FY21. Staff recommends approval. Action this evening, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Our staff report says Jennifer, or our agenda says Jennifer DeRay has a presentation for us. So Jennifer, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Let me start this real quick. Okay, so we are required by law to adopt a resolution annually to assess street improvement lighting maintenance districts, or SILMDs for short. The light districts have to cover the cost of electricity, maintenance, and administrative costs. We currently have 194 SILMDs, which all operate like 194 different different funds with their own self-balancing set of accounts to account for the costs and the revenues of each individual district. So 65 of these are city-owned districts in which street traffic employees perform the maintenance. 121 districts are utility-owned, so either Northwest Energy or Yellowstone Valley Electric, and 8 districts have a combination of city-owned and utility-owned lights. Every year, we analyze each and every district and recommend assessments for the year. The recommended FY21 assessments will generate approximately $2.4 million to cover light district costs. The assessment is increasing for 53 districts, and 139 districts will either stay the same or decrease. We also have 2 new districts to assess this year. The overall assessment amount is actually a decrease this year of about $45,000 from the previous year. So we are asking council to approve the resolution tonight to assess the SILNDs for FY21 so we can continue the operation of the light districts.
Is that your presentation?
That was short and sweet. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you very much. We will have a public hearing, but before we do, questions for Jennifer. Jennifer, I'll just start with one. Assuming costs go up a little each year, why don't all of these go up a little bit each year?
Mayor and council, we look at each light district, like I said, and so sometimes we overestimate in the previous year, or some just do not have the anticipated maintenance costs that we estimate the previous year. In this case, we had a lot more that actually decreased or stayed the same because the electricity estimates that we got from Northwest Energy the year before just didn't come to fruition. So we saved some money. We're able to lower the costs going into this year because the reserves were at a level where we could.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Jennifer? Councilmember Brown?
Jennifer, just to clarify, now these are just the city light districts, right? We're not adjusting Montana Power and all those guys, right?
Councilmember Brown, we actually administer all light districts, whether they're city owned or whether they're Northwest Energy owned or Yellowstone Valley Electric owned. So the utilities can't administer their own light district. It either has to be a municipality or a county. So everything goes through us. For a Northwest Energy owned district, we have some administration costs, no maintenance costs, and the electricity costs, so that it all flows through the city of Billings for both the costs and the revenues.
Okay, so just to follow up, Mayor?
Please.
I'm always confused by these because, the power companies are charging, these rates for basically infinity, and they're not replacing those lights. They're not doing all of that, but the rates keep going up. And I don't understand, is electricity really going up that much all the time? Or is this to cover maintenance and stuff as well? You say it doesn't include maintenance though, right?
Councilmember Brown, the Northwest Energy owned light districts are at a different rate than a city-owned because the Northwest Energy-owned light districts include what they call an ownership charge. And so that's all part of the electricity bill. So if you, as a resident, are in a Northwest Energy-owned district, like I am, I pay more for the actual electricity costs for Northwest Energy because of that ownership charge. And that ownership charge is that's the one that goes on forever, where it never truly pays off, the installation of the poles or anything.
Okay, tonight's not the night to argue it, but I know it keeps coming up, what would it take to buy those out and let the city manage them all? But I think that's probably too big a question for tonight. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Councilmember Ewell, you had your hand up, and then Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. And Sean, I've looked at this too, and I believe it is a state allowed thing. It's not something that the city can address. It's something that needs to be addressed by the state. But I did have a question for Chris, because I believe, Chris, in our light maintenance districts, we had talked offline at times about the maintenance of some of our districts where we don't have the money to do replacements. Have we changed the way will we see something that where we actually change the way we assess them to include some of the replacement costs up front, or to build up that reserve?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, specifically where we're at, I kind of need to lean on Jennifer a little bit to know are we covering maintenance costs where we're at? Like Councilmember Brown's comments, this is not unique to Billings, which doesn't make it right. In fact, I think they're kind of a mess all over Montana, hundreds of districts, literally, and they candidly just don't raise up to the top of the priority list when you look at everything we're trying to tackle. But there definitely are some issues there. Jennifer, can you help those specifically address the question about how do you feel about the districts we as a city have ownership of and have a responsibility to make sure we're maintaining properly?
Yes, so all of our districts that were created before a year or two ago, we cannot, because of the way they were created and the language in the resolutions, include the replacement costs. We did change that a couple of years ago. We changed that language so that all the new districts, we can actually include the replacement costs of poles and the other underground infrastructure for lights as well. But we have two options for the others. And one is to redo all of our light districts, which also requires going out to a vote and publicly noticing everybody and doing it that way. Or the other one is to do SIDs for different areas around the city to replace them through SIDs, which also requires a vote.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ewald, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Other questions for Jennifer? Jennifer, one question. I've had some phone calls from people who have a light out, and they call and say, "Hey, the light out has been out." Blah blah blah, and the city then gets in the role of figuring out whose light that is and acting as kind of a middleman. Should we be requiring a little simple placard on every light that says this light is owned by Northwestern Energy, state of Montana? If there's a problem, call that number. Would that be helpful to the city, or it's inevitable we're going to be in the middle of them anyway? Or has anybody thought about that?
Mayor Cole, Northwest Energy does tag their lights. They don't have all that information on it as to where to call, but they do tag it. So if it is tagged, it's a Northwest Energy light. We could look at that in the future for City of Billings lights. Again, it's a matter of prioritizing and costs and staff time in doing so. The other thing that we are doing is trying to update our GIS a little bit more and have better maps out on the website so people could go out there and easily decide who it is and a pop-up of where to call is kind of the future of where we're trying to go.
Okay, thank you. Something to think about. Other questions for Jennifer before we go to a public hearing? If you are interested in commenting on this, by the way, get ready to call 237-6196. Any other questions? Councilmember Purington.
I would just ask if Jennifer can direct us where we could get this information, because I don't know anything about that. It would be nice to know.
Councilmember Purington, are you referring to the maps on the website?
No, the one where you were talking about the options that we would have to change that, and these maintenance costs and replacement costs between Northwest Energy and the city, the state.
So there's no information out anywhere. Our plan is to come back. Well, there's two options here. The first issue, as far as replacing the lights that we have, the old lights or the old poles and the infrastructure. Our plan is to figure out what we're going to do, what we're proposing, what our options are, what the total cost would be, and then we would come back to council at a work session and discuss that. The other, to talk about the ownership charge on the lights, we could send council, examples of bills and what we actually receive from Northwest Energy for 2 different districts, so you can see what we're talking about there with those ownership charges.
Okay, just to clarify, Jennifer, so Public Works will be coming back with some sort of proposal or other discussion for council on addressing this problem of replacing old city-owned lights. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, we'll look forward to it. Great. Let's call or open it up for public hearing. If anybody is listening, would like to comment on this item, that phone number again, 237-6196. Please call as quickly as possible. There is a delay, so turn off your television, turn off your computer, and we'll ask you to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and state your name and address. Again, number 237-6196, same number for all of our public hearings tonight. Denise, do we have anyone who has called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I have received no calls.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. If you hear the phone ring in the next few seconds, please let us know. And we'll move on to council discussion. Councilmember Boyette.
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor, if that's okay.
Please.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the resolution adopting annual SILMD assessments for FY21 as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Denise. The second. Discussion now on the motion. Is there discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval. Consistent with the staff recommendation, we'll move to a vote if there is no discussion. If not, we'll move to the vote. All in favor of the motion for approval, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Denise, would you please read item number 6?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing and resolution approving reduction of the arterial construction fee assessment for residents in commercial zones. Staff recommends approval. Action this evening, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Jennifer DeRay, long time no see. It's all yours again, although arterial fees are our topic.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. So the resolution assessing arterial construction fees to fund the construction and reconstruction of arterial streets was already passed by Council in June. So what we're doing tonight is actually asking you to reduce some of those assessments. So the owners of specific properties can petition for a reduction of their arterial construction fee assessment by August 31st of each year. Per the arterial construction fee ordinance that was passed back in 2004, this reduction is available for properties that are zoned either commercial or residential manufactured homes and are currently owner occupied as a single family residence. So if the property is determined to meet the requirements for a reduction by staff, then the relief is in the form of using the residential 9600 rate to calculate the arterial assessment rather than the commercial rate, and capping the square footage on the property at 9600 square feet, just as residential properties are. So this year, Public Works received 57 completed applications for the reduction in arterial fees. 56 were approved. The one that was denied was not a single-family residence. The annual reduction to the arterial fee assessments for FY21 is $4,650.82. So tonight, council can vote to approve the resolutions as recommended by staff or not approve, but if voting to not approve, it must be based on the criteria that the reductions are not met. So that's all I have, and I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Cole.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. By my calculation, well, just eyeballing, it looks like the average reduction is about $45 or something in that vicinity.
Correct. Obviously, some are more, some are less, but around $45.
So it kind of begs the question, since we have to do this every year, and I don't know if you have to send out a letter or what the administrative process is, but there's all these studies that show the average cost of sending out a business letter is whatever it is, $50, $100 or something like that. Would we be better off rather than having an annual waiver, grant these, for a longer period of say 5 years, so you had less administrative cost?
Mayor Cole, it is a staff-intensive process for sure to do this each year. We don't send letters out, but we do advertise it. We put it on our website. We put it on social media, and we have our regulars that submit every year. We already have people that submitted for next year. They do it right away. So yes, we could definitely look at that. And I will say that if Project Recode passes, that changes a lot for all of Public Works assessments. So we should probably look at all of these and this process included in that when Project Recode comes back to council.
Okay, just my observation. We don't want to trip over quarters to pick up nickels or whatever the expression is. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. So Jennifer, this is something that the property owners have to apply themselves each year. Do we charge, or is the city charge a administration or application fee for this process?
Councilmember Neese, there is no application fee. They just fill out the form with no charge.
Okay. And Mayor, a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Is that something the city can do? Can they implement an application fee? Or is that prohibited?
So, Councilmember Neese, this process is defined in a city ordinance. I'm sure that we could change the process and apply a fee to it through the same process by changing the ordinance.
Okay. I'm just asking to see if there's some way to help cover some of the administration costs, but all right, thank you.
Other questions, Councilmember Ewald?
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, is this done for a fairness reason, or why do we give them this discount?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Neese. Back when the arterial fee was created in 2004, it was done as an equity issue so that, when the fee was created, it was based on impacts to the road. So depending on commercial versus, single family residence is a lot different impacts to our arterial system. So because there are a number of residentials in commercial zoning, we did it for an equity issue so that they didn't have to pay the commercial rate.
A follow-up, Mayor, please.
Please.
How would this compare in fairness to all the platted lots in the city of Billings that pay a street maintenance fee, but there's no street that's even goes by the lots?
Councilmember Ewald, I think, we've looked at the street maintenance fee before as far as what we charge. We can look at that again. I think it's separate than what we're talking about tonight, but we can certainly look at that when we're looking at street maintenance fees next year. There is a vacant fee cap for street maintenance, but we might want to look at the equity there too.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just need to correct something I said earlier. I was looking at the chart that's been distributed to council members. It shows the assessment if the petition is approved. And those are eyeballing at something in the $40 range. But the reduction is on average $83 per lot. And I got that by just taking the $4,650 total reduction divided by 56 lots or properties, and that's what gets you to that 83 number. So in percentage terms, it's a significant reduction for these property owners, but not a lot in actual dollars, or roughly $83 each on average. Other questions for staff before going to a public hearing? Are there any other questions? Anyone who's interested in commenting out there should be prepared to call 237-6196. Any questions before we go to public hearing? Not seeing any, so we'll open the public hearing now. Please call if you're interested in commenting on item number 6. Phone number again, 237-6196. We are ahead, the actual meeting is ahead of what you're hearing, so please turn off your television or your computer. We're about a minute ahead. You'll be very confused if you try to listen to both. That number again, 237-6196. While we wait briefly because of that delay, any other questions for Jennifer? Councilmember Brown?
Yeah, this might be for Mr. Brooks. I don't know. Can we, in our motion, extend these to a 5-year term, or does it have to go through some other process?
Your Honor, Counsel, I think you would be limited to what the ordinance says. So, yeah, I think it would be based upon our ordinance and not an extension.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe Brent and Jennifer, you could look at that. If Project Recode changes or fixes the problem, so be it. But if it doesn't, I suspect the council would, if you need our cooperation, we don't want to see you spending a lot of administrative time on these sorts of small dollar items if it's not necessary. Okay, I think we've delayed adequately. Is there any public comment? Denise, anybody who's called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I've received no phone calls.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will close the public hearing portion of our discussion tonight.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution approving reduction of the arterial construction fee assessment for residents in commercial zones as recommended by staff.
And second, Councilmember Joy, she had her hand up there. Okay, the motion is for approval. Discussion now on the motion. Is there any discussion in favor or in opposition to the motion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. The vote again is for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the motion are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Denise, would you read item number 7?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing and resolution assessing the nuisance property abatements. Staff recommends approval. Action this evening, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. This is Wyeth Friday. Chris, I assume we can just hand it to Wyeth. Yes, Wyeth, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. And actually, Mayor, I'm going to hand it to Nicole Cromwell, our code enforcement supervisor, but just wanted to mention we have 2 items here in a row. We have property abatements and then weed abatements. Nicole was just going to speak kind of to those items overall for you to introduce them. And then obviously you can take them both separately, but that was kind of what we thought we would do. So I'll let her speak a little bit on the items.
Okay, that'd be great. Nicole, if you can address both, we will have separate public hearings and separate votes, but if you can combine your presentation, that's much more efficient. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Certainly, Mayor. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but for the property nuisance abatements, we have 5 assessments before you this evening. The total reimbursement through these assessments to the general fund would be about $37,000. 2 of those assessments are capped by statutory language of $9,500 each. Actual cost for those 2 abatements at 114 and 118 South 29th was about $46,000 total, but we may only assess $9,500 per property under state law. The other 3 are under the statutory limit, and so we can assess and recover the full cost of those property nuisance abatements. These were all court-ordered abatements. These were not voluntary or requests from property owners. These were done after long compliance efforts through the Code Enforcement Division and then finally through municipal court that allowed us to move forward and demolish structures or assess structures for demolition and clean up property and remove junk and debris. That is my very short explanation of that. I will tell you that these neighborhoods are grateful and appreciative of the work that was done by the city, and this will help the general fund recover some of that cost.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Questions for Nicole or other staff? I'd like to start with one on the 9,500 limit. That's because of that's the jurisdictional limit in municipal court. Probably a question for Brent Brooks, but also maybe planning staff. Could we have filed these abatement proceedings in district court and then not been subject to the $9,500 municipal court jurisdictional limit? And if so, should we do that in the future?
I'll let Brent handle that.
Your Honor, Counsel, we have talked about this extensively. As most of you know, we have a monthly code enforcement meeting where Tom Party, our deputy city attorney, and myself meet with code enforcement, Ms. Cromwell and Mr. Friday, and we have talked about this extensively. And the short answer is yes. It does have some shortcomings, but the short answer is yes, we could in those times where the jurisdictional limit of municipal court exceeds $9,500. It does have some drawbacks that I won't bore you with the details now, but certainly it gets on the district court civil docket. And certainly that docket is full, and that doesn't mean we cannot try it, and we may very well want to try at least a test case and see how it goes in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for staff? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank the Code Enforcement Department, Nicole, and for all the work you guys have done. You guys have done a great job as far as getting a lot of these properties cleaned up, and there's a lot more to go. So I look forward to seeing more of that work done. And Mayor you asked my first question I had, so thank you very much. But Nicole, we're short several thousand, almost $20,000 probably roughly between those other 2 properties. We're budget, what fund does that come out of? And how is it paid?
Well, these are costs that are paid directly out of a line item in the Code Enforcement Division, which is the general fund budget. It's a nuisance abatement fund. I know this past year it was reduced from its normal line item amount to, I believe, $50,000 was this year's budgeted amount. Typically, if we go over that amount in any one fiscal year, we come to you on quarters through finance and get budget amendments to put money back in the fund. When that money is assessed, we have not in the past. It takes some time to recover those funds, even after assessing them to taxes. Typically, we find property owners that are in this situation are not paying their property taxes. So sometimes we have to wait for foreclosure or a tax lien sale to recover the money, but we always have. this is the first time that I know of that we are not recovering all of the funds, and that is because of the statutory limitation in municipal court judgments. Certainly, our new code that you approved in 2019 to fix our existing nuisance abatement code said that we should do a good faith estimate before we send a case forward to the judge for an abatement order. And if we come up with something on a good faith estimate that's well over that $9,500 limit, we could very well be coming to the city attorney's office and city administration saying, can you let us file this in district court, because we think we're going to win and we don't want to lose that much money on this abatement.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Other Councilmember Purington?
So Nicole, does it cost the same amount of money to take it through district court for the city? I'm not talking about I guess that would be the defendants, but does it cost the same amount of money to the city to go to district court as well as municipal court?
Well, I think I'll let Mr. Brooks answer part of that. Typically in municipal court, if it's a municipal infraction, the city attorney's office does not represent the city. It's the code enforcement officer's job to present the case and get the judgment from the court. If we go to district court, we do have to have representation by city legal staff in district court, where we can't go there pro se, so to speak. We can't just send a code officer to district court. So there is a cost differential there, but I'll let Mr. Brooks chime in.
Thanks, Yara and Councilwoman Purington. Yes, there would be additional cost in district court. It's hard to estimate, but certainly there is the potential, if the case is contested, a person retaining an attorney, which is their prerogative and their right to do. And certainly that would prolong the case, and you could have additional discovery, as we call it, including written discovery request as well as depositions. Now, that's the worst case scenario, but I can safely say that it would cost more money in district court. How much more? It would be fact driven depending on the particular case.
Thank you very much. Other questions for staff before going to a public hearing? Any other questions for staff? For everybody listening on the public, it sounds like we're close to public hearing, so be prepared to call 237-6196. Any other items for staff before we do open up for public hearing? I'm not seeing anything, so go ahead and call that 237-6196. And while you're doing that, we'll hear from Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Brown?
So Nicole, we had $50,000 in the budget, so we're still within that $50,000, even with this $20,000 we're not going to recoup, right? You guys figure in the budget that we are going to recoup?
Yes, we do. And as I said, if we do happen to go over that line item amount, it's all in the operations and maintenance section of our budget. So if we have to pour money back into that partway through the year, we come to you and ask for a budget amendment. There haven't been many years when that has occurred, but we do have some that are lined up that we could be talking about budget amendments for those abatements. A lot of times we give, even after a court judgment has been entered, we wait 30 days for an appeal. And then, obviously contracting abatement takes time. So even after a judgment in our favor to abate a property, property owners typically have at least 2 or 3 months to take on the effort themselves. And some of them have.
Thank you. I would say the $50,000 is a bargain for some of the work that you guys have done. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris Kukulski wanted to chime in, as did Brent Brooks. So, Chris?
Mayor, thanks. And I just want to assure the council and thank Nicole. She's made the point, I think, very well. When reducing this number in the budget, it was hard for me to be willing to reduce it. However, I assured our staff, if we spent that money, I tell you, I'd come to you if we spent $250,000 cleaning up properties in Billings. I would come to you and make a strong case to amend the budget to do it. So our limitation has not limited our work in being engaged and proactive in trying to get these properties cleaned up. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Brent Brooks and Councilmember Ronning, did you have something for us? No. Okay. So Brent Brooks.
Mayor and Council, I was just going to emphasize that that third item, which was $22,000 total abatement, we will assess with the council's approval $9,500. So that the net deficit, if you will, in that particular item would be $12,000. So we're not losing the entire $22,000, but we are limited to the statutory limit of $9,500.
Okay. Thank you very much. We did open public hearing for anyone who is interested in calling in to be heard. And that number again, 237-6196. There's been a substantial delay since we opened it. So Denise, has anybody called 237-6196 to be heard on these nuisance abatements?
No, Mayor. I've had no callers.
Okay, then we will close our public hearing on item number 7. And open it up to the council for motion. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing the nuisance property abatement as recommended by staff.
Thank you. And Councilmember Neese right there had a second. Discussion on the motion. Motion again is for approval. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? If not, we will proceed to a vote. Seeing no raised hands, all in favor of the motion, which is for approval, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the motion are all members of City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Number 8 will probably be fairly brief. It'll be very similar, but there is some additional discussion on weeds. We're at 7:33. We're not going to get out of here right now. So why don't we take a break and we'll come back 7:40, and which is 7 minutes, and we'll take it from there. Welcome back.
I'm just going to turn my video off so that I can eat a little bit, but I'll turn it back on for votes.
We don't feel bad that you're not going to share. Councilmember Purington, are you with us yet? I'm sure Councilmember Purington will join us. If she doesn't, briefly, she might be having a technical problem. But the beginning of this will be mostly just reading item number 8. So I don't think she'll miss much. Okay, Councilmember Purington is with us. So Denise, would you please read item number 8?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing and resolution assessing the weed abatements. Staff is recommending approval this evening. Action this evening is approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Nicole, what else would you like to add to your presentation when it comes to weeds?
Well, thank you, Mayor. This is something that we do every year, actually twice a year. This is the first half assessments. This would be for property owners that failed to cut their weeds when we requested them to be cut, and that we sent city crews after notice to cut these properties. 142 were sent to be cut to parks this year. 22 of those were cut before parks staff got there. So 120 were cut by park staff. And of those, most of those paid their assessment charges. But you have before you tonight about 39 properties to be assessed for the cutting charges. And those would be, because they're coming in the first half, they would be split in half and then assessed both in November and then May, so half and half. We did see a reduction in compliance with nuisance weed notices this year. We're down to less than 90% compliance, which is concerning. We did have more weed cases this year because we had more moisture, and that seems to track over the years that we've looked at. The rainfall tracks with the number of weed complaints and cases that we have. So this year was up a little bit over last year, about 10% over last year. But we did see that reduction in compliance. So that's all I have to add to the staff report and assessments that you have in front of you.
Thank you very much. Anybody from the public, be prepared to call the call-in number for our public hearing when we open the public hearing, probably in just a couple minutes. That number again, 237-6196. Council members, do you have questions for Nicole or any other staff member on the weed abatement list? Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Nicole, I just want to compliment your crew. There was a couple of weed problems I called in and they were taken care of immediately. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions or compliments? Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo Councilmember Boyette's on that as well. I had some issues with some weeds and they're taken care of. And I really like the website that you have that people can go to and see the different code enforcement issues that are outstanding. And then there's a link right there to the form to where you can actually file a complaint. So I think if I don't know if that's why you see a higher amount of increases or not, but you're sure making it easier for citizens to see the problem and then report the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions for staff? Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. Nicole, so I have a question for you in regard to, is it city property right away or personal homeowner property if there is a space between the sidewalk and where a homeowner would have a fence? So if you think about going along Rimrock, like 17th Street or 13th Street, and then go east you think about some of that area where some of the homeowners, the back of their homes is a little bit south of the sidewalk, but they have a fence there. There seems to be a whole lot of weeds that grow in between that fence and the sidewalk. Whose responsibility is that? And the reason I'm asking is because we did have an issue in Ward 4 where people were upset that a property owner wasn't attending to their weeds and then pointed out some city property. So who owns that section?
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Ronning, for your question. Actually, we've partnered with Public Works this past summer to do a little public service announcement. And in fact, in the weed ordinance that the city has adopted, the adjacent property owner is responsible to the middle of an alley, to the middle of a street even, for cutting and destroying nuisance weeds, whether they're growing flat across the sidewalk or just getting tall behind the sidewalk or in the boulevard between the sidewalk and the street. All the property owner responsibility. That said, there are areas that City Public Works has traditionally mowed those adjacent pieces of right-of-way, particularly where we have what I would call orphaned right-of-ways. You don't really have an adjacent owner that you could hold responsible for it. So we are working with Public Works and helping them figure out and refine their city responsible mow areas. And there are not very many of them, but where they do occur, the city has sometimes consistently and sometimes inconsistently taken care of those public right-of-ways. But as far as I know, those properties along Rimrock Road, both sides, north and south, are responsible, all the way to the curb line of the street to take care of that. If you send those to us, we'll check our city mow maps, and if it's not on there, we send a notice to the property owner. Yes, it can be very inconvenient. You have to walk your mower all the way around a city block to get to your weeds sometimes, but that's what it is.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Chris, did you want to comment on that?
I just would ask the council, it is one of the things that jumps out at me in Billings. When we do Project Recode, we have a lot of areas that we allow privacy fences that may make sense to someone's backyard, but they really are disruptive to public rights of way and create a very unfriendly neighborhood from the street. And so I just ask you to be conscientious of that when we get into Project Recode, and small issues like this can end up making a difference. Who's responsible for getting their lawnmower all the way around the block to take care of the area between a public street and that privacy fence? So just wanted to flag that as you look at the Project Recode and long-term quality of our neighborhoods and attractiveness and kind of welcomeness of them. So thank you.
Thank you. Nicole, a question, then I'll have another question, but what is the height limitation that defines a nuisance weed?
Okay, it's any untended vegetation that's 12 inches or taller. So if you're taking care of it, it can be as tall as it needs to be. But if you're neglecting it and you're not taking care of it, anything over 12 inches needs to be cut down.
So the moral of the story is get out there and fertilize those dandelions to make sure they get nice and healthy. So here's the question. A 12-inch weed in a sidewalk on an arterial street looks like a giant sequoia. Why do we allow that? I certainly understand 12-inch weeds, in a vacant lot, but a 1-inch weed broadly across, 3 square feet of sidewalk looks terrible and is bad for the construction of and the durability of the sidewalk, I assume, and the curb. Would you and your staff be open to the council amending those rules to have a much lower height limitation and tougher standard for sidewalks and curbs?
Well, you certainly could, boulevards and against the back of sidewalks, but we have noticed property owners that allow those creeping weeds that never get over 12 inches tall, but can cover a sidewalk pretty definitively if you let them go. We've noticed them basically that they're obstructing a right-of-way by allowing that weed to take over. So they have to go out there and pull those or somehow get them off the sidewalk. So we've stretched to make that, connection between obstructing the right of way and allowing nuisance vegetation to get out of control there.
Okay, I guess my preference would be you not have to stretch and that it be clear, so that's better for everybody. Other questions for Nicole before we go to a public hearing? Questions for Nicole? Okay, then we'll open it up for public hearing. That phone number, 237-6196. Please call that number if you're listening and would like to comment on this item number 8, weed abatements. Reminder that our meeting is ahead of what you're hearing, so please turn off the sound to your television or your computer so you're not confused, and just listen to Denise on the other end of that phone line, which you'll talk to her if you call 237-6196. We ask you to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and to tell us your name and address.
Okay, Mayor, we have a phone call. Hello, and thank you for your call. You've reached the public comment period for tonight's City Council meeting. You will have 3 minutes to give us your comment. May I have your name and address, please?
Nancy Bennett, 801 Avenue E, Jersey, Billings, Montana, 59102.
Okay, Nancy, go ahead.
I don't understand why the City Council can't figure out that people need to go out and take care of the weeds. I've been fighting this for 10 years with the slumlord across the street. But anyway, somebody helped me recently, but that's good. I mean, you drive by my neighborhood from Avenue 801, Avenue E, down the street, up to Avenue F, you won't see a single weed on my side. So I don't understand why people can't be held responsible for that. That's my point. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Any other comments for somebody who's called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I don't have any other callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will close our public hearing on item number 8 and open up for council discussion or motion. Is there Councilmember Yakovich?
Thank you, Honored Council. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing the weed abatements as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette has second. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honored Council. I just wanted to lump these two together. We all are challenged in all the wards on this here, so it's not just one ward. And really, the staff, I really appreciate the staff, especially Craig Salazar. He's really been a great asset to our community and addressing a lot of the tougher issues. And Tanya Punt as well. And I really appreciate also Judge Kolar. I have attended some of the meetings or some of the sessions with the judge, and Craig and the staff really have to have all their ducks in a row. They come before the judge, and it's arduous. It's a lot of time and effort, but I really appreciate Judge Kolar. She's really supporting us in the community a lot more with code enforcement, and really, I just want to thank her for that. Finally, just or a couple things. There's a lady named Kathy Dunham whose husband owned the First Avenue gas station, First Avenue South gas station purchased 416 State Avenue. And that was the top of the list of all the houses. And forgive me, I know I'm just trying to do both at the same time here, but she paid $24,000 to get this or more to knock it down. And I asked her, her husband passed away, and she just said she wanted to do it. She's not a developer. She's has a rental or two, but really invested in that. So if you ever drive by 416 State, it's just great to see. And that's to all of you, council, to Judge Kolar and so many others. And I'll just wrap this up with some of the weeds that I see. Two of them in particular. There's no excuse. So that lady was very accurate. One, I see a lot of these are absentee owners. They, I don't know why people buy property if they don't take care of it, especially landlords, but also some businesses were fined as well. And we just have to be diligent on that, because in every neighborhood, when you just let it go to pot, it just kind of impacts everybody. So really critical, this area. I just want to continue to support them, what they're doing. And thank you, council, for supporting code enforcement as well.
Thank you very much. Other comments or discussion relating to the motion? If not, we will proceed to a vote. The motion again by Councilmember Yakwich is for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all members of the City Council. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Denise, would you read item number 9?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing a resolution setting general obligation, GO, debt, and Public Safety 2 PS2 mill levy rates for FY21 per the passage of 60 mills. Staff recommends approval. Action this evening, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Our presenter tonight is our City Finance Director, Andy Zeller. Andy, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I have no PowerPoint presentation available to answer questions. Real briefly, as you all are aware, the Public Safety Mill Levy passed. So this will set the mills for that at 60 mills. Additionally, we have received the city's taxable value for the next year. There was an increase of 1.8% over the prior year. And we always wait till we receive that until we set the general obligation bonds mill levies, because we need to generate enough to make the debt payment. So those will go down slightly from what was in the budget by 1.8%. This is a total mills of, what's the total to? 179.48. That'll mean the total mill levy cost on a median home for 2021 will be $511.25, an increase of $55.43 from the prior year, largely attributable to the Public Safety 2 repeal and replace that was passed by voters. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions for Andy? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, I see that the library mill levy is going up from 4.66 over 5 to 5.44. Can you help me reconcile that with our charter that states council may levy no more than 5 mills for the purpose of operating or providing funds for the operation, maintenance, and capital needs of the permanently Billings Library only?
Mayor, Councilmember Neese, this is for the general obligation debt that was approved by voters to build the library. This is not for operating the library. It is going up slightly, as I referenced in the memo. The Library Foundation donated $3 million initially to help build the library, and that was spread over 10 years, $300,000 a year. That donation is going away. And so the mill levy will have to start to increase slightly to cover that additional amount. And because our first payment is on July 1st, we need to collect some of that this coming fiscal year. But again, this is for the debt payment to build the building, not to operate the library. Those mills were set the night we adopted budget.
Mayor, quick follow-up.
Please.
So the ordinance does indicate capital needs. A building is a capital need, and that's where I'm struggling to want to agree to approve something like this when our not the ordinance, but our charter states that. So I'm trying to reconcile this capital need of the building with increase in or approving a mill levy that's over what our charter states.
So Mayor Cole and Finance Director Zeller, my speculation, Andy, is right. We're talking about without voter approval. So the reference that Roy is reading in the charter does not include the voter approved adjustment to build the library project. Is that correct?
Andy, can you comment on that, please?
I suspect so. I mean, certainly these were approved by the voters when they approved the construction of the library. Why we don't amend our charter to include these, I suspect is because they're temporary and they are only through the existence of the debt. I would point out you would be in default of your debt if you don't approve that. You promised the bondholders that we would levy the necessary funds to pay that debt. So maybe Brent can speak to that a little bit on why it's separate from the charter. But yeah, again, this is voter approved for the debt.
Brent, can you comment?
Well, Your Honor, and Councilmember Neese, we have always treated GO bonds differently than a charter mill levy election. And so I think that's the distinction. I think Andy pretty much explained it, that the GO bonds have always been treated separately than I believe it's section 1.05 of the charter concerning the library.
But can I be clear again? The council and the administration doesn't have the choice to raise it above the charter limit, but the voters do, and the voters did. The voters approved the library construction project and the debt associated with it and our ability to pay that debt.
Yeah, so I guess there's a separate resolution out there that went to the voters. It's not an amendment to the charter. It's just a separate assessment, as is similar to Dealer Park, right? There's no charter provision dealing with Dealer Park, but we have that assessment that was approved. What else? Does anybody want to add anything to this, or staff? It'd be worth you're checking into this and maybe giving us a report back at a minimum, because obviously we don't want to be violating the charter.
Mayor, be happy to circle back. What I'm extremely confident of, but will confirm it in writing, is again, without voter approval, we have those strict limitations, but voters have approved bond issues, Dealer Park, library. They could approve another one that you may choose to take to them. And with voter approval, then that debt is a voter approved obligation of mills to be levied to pay that debt.
Okay, that makes sense to me, but obviously I guess we want to check on that. Councilmember Tricky?
I would just add that something is being paid out of a fund from an existing mill levy, and something that's being paid out of an additional fund for a bond. If they were actually being the same thing, then we wouldn't need the bond because we actually have the money. We do the bond because we need additional money, which is going to require additional revenue source in order to pay it off.
Yes, and there clearly was a separate vote to finance the construction of the library. Councilmember Neese or anybody else want to follow up on this or have other questions for Andy? We've not opened it up for a public hearing. We're just in the questions of staff phase. If Pierce?
Yeah, just to follow up on Mary, and I don't disagree that the voters approved this, but in the general section of the mill levies, what we can do, we can't raise that unless it states in there unless we do voter approved. And this section, this section of our charter does not give the council the authority to go to the voters to approve anything more than 5 mills for the library, and including capital needs. And so I understand that if the staff wants to look into that, it'd be fine. I would ask that the library mill levy be separated so it can take a separate vote on that, because I would like to vote no on that item.
Okay, we don't have any motions on the floor yet, but you made that point, and we can address that when there's a motion. Again, Councilmember Neese was hoping to separate out that item. Further questions for staff? Any questions for staff? If not, we'll go to a public hearing on this item number 9. The phone number for anybody who would like to be heard is 237-6196. This is setting for the mill levies for Public Safety 2, Park, Streets, Library, and Dealer Park. That number again, 237-6196. Our meeting is ahead, so please silence your computer or your television. We'll ask you to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and state your name and address at the beginning. Denise, do we have anybody who has called in to 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I have no calls.
Okay, if the bell rings in the next 2 seconds, please let us know. But assuming not, we will close the public hearing on item number 9, open up for council discussion. Council discussion or motion? Councilmember Joy, and then Councilmember Purington.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, having conducted a public hearing considering written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve a resolution setting GO debt and Public Safety 2 mill levy rates for FY21 per the passage of 60 mills as recommended by staff.
Okay, and second by Councilmember Shaw. Discussion now on the motion, and just point out the motion is for full approval, including the library. Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Neese.
So, Andy, you made the comment that if this is not approved, then we are, that's not a good thing. But I wanted to hear what Roy had to say regarding his proposal that you vote separately on the library, because it's what, 0.44 of a mill over the 5 mills. So I don't understand how you would separate those and still pay off the debt.
Andy, can you comment on Councilmember Brown?
Well, I think I have one point of clarification here. The mills set out that are capped in the charter, you've already set the night of budget adoption. That includes the 74 general fund, the 20 public safety 1, the 5 library, and the 10 transit. These are all tonight are in addition to those. So this will not be a violation of the charter. Those operating mills have already been approved by council the night you adopted budget. The 5.44 mills for the GO debt for the library are 100% for GO debt. They are not for anything else. They're only to pay the debt. The other thing I will point out briefly, section 1.02 that sets out the mill levy limit for 74 mills, does set the limit at 74 mills, but also provides that you can increase on an affirmative vote of a simple majority of the votes cast in an election on this question. So that's where this would qualify. I mean, these are, like Chris said, have been approved by voters, and section 1.02 authorizes that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Brown, you had your hand up, and then I'm sorry, I recognized Councilmember Neese before, so we'll go to Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. All I'm asking is to separate out the Geo Library for a separate vote. And I believe I have a right to separate that item out, and we can sure ask Brent Brooks, since these are separate, distinct issues.
Your Honor and Counsel, yes, you can separate out a question that does have multiple parts pursuant to your meeting rules and procedure.
Okay, and Brent, is it your conclusion that this is such an animal? And if so, does any council member have the right to do that unilaterally, or do we need to approve an amendment to the motion, or we just do it based on the request of the council member?
Right. Under your rules, it can be a simple request by one or more council members. There is no vote required.
And again, you think this is an applicable place for that situation?
I think it would, Your Honor.
Okay. The parliamentarian hath spoken. Therefore, unless somebody has a reason to the conclusion, Brent, is it acceptable then since we had a motion on the floor, that we will deem that motion amended to exclude the library component and then come back to the library component? Does that seem like an acceptable way to proceed?
Your Honor, I think so, with the maker of the motion and the second considering that or expressing their acceptance of that.
Okay, any objection by our movements, Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Shaw? Councilmember Shaw put a thumbs up, so she didn't object. Councilmember Joy doesn't object, but we did have a couple council members and our city administrator want to comment, so we'll look to City Administrator Kukulski and then Councilmember Trickey. Chris?
Mayor, thank you. I just want to confirm, Brent, I was reading the same thing that Andy was reading, pulling up the charter, reviewing the charter, and how I would read the charter, and I'm looking for Brent to confirm this, frankly, is that to take the section separately, as Councilmember Neese would be to imply that the voters can't approve any bond issues beyond the specific items that are listed in the charter. And we have two of them. We have a dealer park bond and we have a library bond. And I speculate there's probably been several other voter approved bonds over the past 4 decades. And they are certainly consistent with the charter. They require voter approval. And so I don't want there to be any speculation or confusion. This has nothing to do with separating the vote. You can separate the votes. I clearly see that. But I want to make sure the public and the council understands we're not on shaky territory by approving these voter-approved bonds as the charter permits, only as voter-approved.
Your Honor and Counsel, Mr. Kukulski is absolutely correct. We've had numerous GO bond elections, as the mayor pointed out, Dealer Park, the library, and many others in the past. And there is a distinction between that and the charter mill levy amendments that have been voter approved. So Mr. Kukulski is absolutely correct.
Okay, so you're finding us authority within the section 102 mill levy limit, authorizing a voter-approved levy for general purposes. Councilmember Trickey, did you want to comment further?
I did want to make a comment that I find this to be something that is going to confuse the public. It certainly confuses me. It is 2 separate mill levies. One is not being imposed on the other. And yeah, we can separate out everything that you want if you want to do that. But what you're doing is by separating it out, you're implying that the 2 separate mill levies are the same. And that simply is not the case.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion then that includes all these items other than the library component. Do we have further discussion on that motion? Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As a city attorney has advised us, a member of the council can separate something on a separate question. This is regarded as a separate question, so that is a privilege of a member of council to separate it. But I do agree with the further statement that somehow it is implying that there's something different. And there really isn't anything different in any of the items that have been put together. So thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Brown.
Your Honor, I call question.
Okay, we'll vote on whether to vote. Again, we need 3/4, correct, Brent?
Your Honor and Council, you need 2/3.
Okay, so 7.3. All in favor on whether to proceed to vote, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. So now we'll vote on the motion excluding the library component. All in favor of that, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are all council members. Motion passes unanimously. Brings us then to the library component. Is there a motion or other discussion? Councilmember Yakowicz.
Yes, Your Honor, I make a motion to approve.
Okay, and again, that's this is the library component. Second, Councilmember Chiriki. Discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. As the reason I separate, I asked because I won't be supporting this. I do believe that the charter specifically indicates that the city can only raise 5 mils for the use of the library. It does not give the city the option to go to the voters to raise more for the library, and that's the reason I'm separating this out to vote no. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll be voting in favor. This was voted on years ago, and I mean, it was a big deal, and they passed it. We passed it. I don't think the two are attached at all. We've got the 5 mils for their budget. This is an obligation that the city took on as voter, basically telling us to take it on. So I'll be voting affirmatively.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, which is approval of, again, the library component, please raise your hand. Voting in favor, council members Boyette, Cole, Yakowicz, Chiriki, Joy, Ronning, Ewalt, Brown, Purington, and Shaw. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council member Neese. Thank you very much. So that then is approval of all items, and I think concludes item number 9. With that, then we'll move to item number 10. There's 2 components, A and B. Denise, would you please read item 10A?
Yes, Mayor. Public hearings and resolutions relating to revising encroachment rental fees for FY21. Staff recommends approval. Action this evening, approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, you've got the floor for your presentation here, I guess. Chris, did you have something to introduce?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jennifer. I just wanted to double check, kind of getting confused there in the charter conversation. Did we have a public hearing on that vote that we just took? Did we need to have a public hearing tied to that? Did we have
did need to have a public hearing, and I apologize if I didn't. But I have number 9, public hearing, no comments. So we did have a public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for checking though. Back to item 10A and Jennifer DeRay, encroachment rental fees.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. There are two components tonight, two parts to the encroachment fees. This first item is to revise the encroachment rental fee resolution, and the second item is then to assess the encroachment rental fees based on the rates you approve in the first item for FY21. So there will be one public hearing for both items, but two different votes. We discussed the annual encroachment rental fees recently at the September 8th City Council work session. So I'm just going to give a couple quick points here as reminders. The first is that an encroachment is any privately owned structure that is in the right of way. Some common encroachments include awnings, restaurant patios that are placed on the sidewalks, signs, and underground conduit. Awnings and canopies in the central business district, so the downtown area, are not assessed encroachment rental fees per a 1986 ordinance. There is a permit process that we go through for encroachments, and a permit fee is collected at the time of the application to cover the cost of processing that application. So that's just a one-time fee. So once the encroachment permit is issued, then the encroachment is assessed annually on the property tax statement for the annual rental of the right-of-way. Our current fees are $1 per square foot per year, and these fees have been in place since 1985. So why do we assess an ongoing encroachment rental fee? There are really two primary reasons here. First, we have to cover the annual costs of what we do to manage the encroachments in the right-of-way. These include inspection costs, administration costs, going out and physically looking at these, doing things like making sure the insurance certificates are up to date, and we do a lot of chasing with getting the insurance certificates back to our office. There are also ongoing costs associated with having encroachments in the right-of-way. Not everyone likes having these obstructions, and if there is a complaint, it takes staff time to investigate and follow up. When we are doing construction in the same area as an underground conduit encroachment, there is also an increase in construction costs to ensure our lines are clear of the conduit. So that's the first reason. Then the second reason is to ensure the safety and accessibility of the right-of-way. And it's our job to do that. So the right-of-way is generally dedicated to the movement of vehicles and pedestrians, and property owners often have some options as to where to locate some of these structures that are in the right-of-way. So if we didn't charge rent, why not put everything in the right-of-way? There would be no deterrent. So we don't want problems like those in the pictures on the left. What we're looking for is the right-of-way to be safe and accessible so pedestrians and vehicle traffic can all use it as it's meant to be used. What we are proposing to change this year in the rate structure is to change it to a two-tier structure. Tier 1 encroachments have minimal impact to the right-of-way and include things like awnings, overhanging signs, and underground conduit. Tier 2 encroachments have a major impact to the right-of-way, resulting in part of the right-of-way to be unusable. And Mayor, I know that you sent an email requesting some language changes, and we're certainly not opposed to those, but what we are defining as major is just that. The right-of-way is unusable. So that's our distinction there. Some examples of Tier 2 encroachments include the restaurant patios on the sidewalks, stairways, and sheds in the right-of-way. To recover the costs of engineering and administration for these encroachments, we are proposing a revised fee this year for both tiers to go to $2 per square foot. And then we have also proposed a minimum $10 fee per encroachment. So These fees would generate an additional $26,000 and will cover costs, and thus would go back to the engineering fund in which the costs are incurred. For Tier 2, we are proposing a change in our methodology of changing charging a square footage rate that is equal to 50% of the average taxable value of the adjacent land. So we took a look at this and we looked at all of the property values and the taxable land values of every property that has an encroachment, and what it came down to was an average of $14. So 50% of that is the $7 per square foot, and that's what we're trying to get to. But rather than increasing these fees suddenly by 700%, after not increasing for the last 35 years, we are proposing a 5-year plan to gradually get to our recommended fee. Once those fees are above our level of cost that we're incurring, what we're proposing is that they're utilized for the beautification of the right-of-way in areas that have encroachments. So for example, the downtown area has a lot of encroachments in it. So probably the biggest impact encroachments downtown are the sidewalk patios. And you can bet that the neighbors of these businesses are impacted in a big way. So we are proposing putting money back into downtown for beautification, whether that be art in the right of way or more signal box wraps or just other right of way improvements that will benefit downtown property owners. So the table here shows 5 different encroachments, and the FY21, it shows the current fee, the FY21 fee, and then what the fee would be in 5 years if we got to the level that we desire of that $7 per square foot for Tier 2 encroachments. So obviously the $7 desired fee will most likely increase as we go. It might be $7.50 5 years from now, but for these purposes, what we did was just $7 for Tier 2 in 5 years, just to make it simple. So if you look at that first one, it's a sign. It's actually considered Tier 2 only because it's on the ground. So it's actually impacting the right of way and making it unusable. So the current fee is $30. The proposed fee would go this year to $60. And then in 5 years, that fee would be $210 using that $7 per square foot rate. I'll skip down to the outdoor patio. Also, obviously a Tier 2 encroachment. The current fee right now for that one, it's on Broadway, is $500, and the proposed FY21 fee at $2 per square foot is $1,000. And then the fee in 5 years at that $7 rate would be $3,500. So the annual, I'll stop sharing here. The annual assessments do have to be approved tonight to get on the tax statements this year, but council has the option of adopting the revised encroachment rental fee as recommended, not approving the proposed resolution. In that case, it would continue on at the $1 per square foot as they have since 1985, or you can revise the fees to a different amount. So that is that part. That's part A. So I will take any questions before moving on to part B, I think.
Thank you. Questions, Councilmember Joy and then Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Was there any discussion with the Downtown Partnership or some of the properties that actually use that for, say, a patio area about this change, or was it discussion just internal? Thank you.
Mayor, Councilmember Joy, we have not reached out to the Downtown Billings Partnership. This was an internal conversation, and right now the fees would only be to recover the costs. So our plan was to reach out as we go forward if council was going to improve them or approve higher rate increases to get to that $7 level in the future. The one thing that we considered with the Downtown Billings Partnership is it's probably covers a smaller area than what most people consider downtown. There's a lot of downtown properties that have encroachments that are outside of that downtown business property kind of arena there. So we've talked internally about that part too, but we haven't actually had any external conversations.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. My question was on the downtown too. So just, I apologize if I misunderstood this, but the 1986 ordinance downtown has been exempt. Is that correct, from paying these fees at all? And so is this going to be a new fee now for downtown businesses, or did I misunderstand that? I guess I'm kind of confused about, are we changing that ordinance as well?
Mayor and Councilmember Shaw, we're not changing the ordinance. That ordinance exempted downtown from awnings and canopies only, and we have not changed that. So they still will not be assessed for those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Jennifer? Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Purington, and then Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, when this came to the work session, there were some questions about why the money was going to engineering. Has there been discussion, or Kristen, have you guys talked about whether this money would go into general fund, or does it stay into engineering to the special fund that Jennifer is proposing?
Councilmember Neese, Mayor, we have always received that fee in engineering because they are the ones that administer it. They're the ones that incur the cost. So it has always gone back to engineering. I know there was a discrepancy between the two resolutions. I think, it goes back to engineering used to be part of the general fund. They were in the general fund. So I think that's where that language came from in the other resolution.
So the addition I would have, Councilmember Neese and Mayor, is that as Jennifer outlined, we think the $2 a square foot is still going to directly tie to covering cost. But as it raises from that, those are the monies that we want to earmark towards improvements in the right of way. And rather than transfer that money to the general fund or someplace else, I believe we should keep it in public works or engineering and then make those investments and work with the partnership and other kind of neighborhoods as to what they think would be the best mutual benefit from those. So since this year we're not going to exceed that, even if you were to say yes, that gives us, I think, the next 12 months, work with them, figure out, okay, if the phase in continues from $2 to $7, where do we earmark those additional dollars?
Okay. And Mayor, just a quick follow-up then?
Sure.
So tonight we're approving the $2. We're not necessarily approving the $7 or the phase in. We're just approving the $2 at this time, and the staff will bring this back to us sometime mid-year, maybe, with the next phase, what we would phase in, and then look like. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
Councilmember Neese, yes, we would bring it to you again next year with another proposed increase.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, other Councilor Purington and Councilor Brown.
Well, I think the biggest issue that I have with this is that we keep looking for a place to put the money. Before it was for engineering. Now it's going to go into beautification. And so I just have an issue with some of the businesses. I mean, we've talked so much about how businesses are struggling, especially small businesses. And it may not seem a lot for some, but I think for others it could be. And I think also the encroachment part, if it actually impedes traffic, whether it's got to be foot traffic, it can be car traffic, but if it really impedes, then I can see that we would have an encroachment fee. So I just have a problem with saying, well, we're going to still raise their fee and we're still working on where to put that money. I just have a real issue with doing that at this point.
Mayor, Councilmember Purington, I don't think that we have a question as to where the money is going. We have always had it in the engineering fund, and that's where we would expect it to continue. I think the issue is where in the future will we spend that money? And that's what we were proposing tonight and it really doesn't affect anything this year because we're only proposing the amount needed to cover costs. But in the future, if we increase it at the phase-in rates to get to that $7, that will be additional revenue above what we need. And it's that money that, as City Administrator Kukulski said, it would most likely still go back into engineering. They'd most likely be managing those projects, but we would earmark it for specific purposes. And those purposes need to be kind of worked out in the next year.
Okay, thank you very much. I recognize Councilmember Brown, but then Chris had his hand up. So Councilmember Brown, and then we'll go back to Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I don't like this, but I guess my comment is if it truly is just covering cost, I don't want us to necessarily be going in the hole, but it just feels to me kind of like Councilman or Councilwoman Purington, it kind of feels like we're kicking these businesses while they're down. I know it's an insignificant amount, so it almost seems petty to some extent. But I guess if you're telling us that we have 100% increase in the cost year after year to manage these, then I guess it makes sense that we would do this. I don't know later on when we go to $7, that seems a bunch. But is that what you're saying, Jennifer? It's costing us 100% more than it did then to manage these year after year?
Councilmember Brown, yes, we are saying it's costing us 100% more than it did in 1985. So 35 years ago, it was about half of what we're proposing now. Ideally, these should have been raised, periodically over the years. This one just was not.
Okay, Chris Kukulski and then Councilmember Purington.
The other piece I would add is, so first the goal was to recoup cost, and I think council members brought this to our attention wisely because it hasn't been raised in decades. Whether the pandemic causes a slower phase in, that I think that's a really good policy question for you guys. The second policy question really is, in my mind, so I'm a restaurant on Main Street and I'm using up a significant part of the sidewalk as my business venture. The neighbors are all giving something up to a degree for that. So it is to tie it to more of a market value for the property they're using, not our cost. It was to tie it more to market, and we went 50% of market. And then how we thought we would add value to the neighbors and the individuals is by reinvesting that money in beautification in the right of way. So it's all totally conceptual. It's all policy wise. If the council doesn't want to go this direction, that's totally your guys' call. But that's kind of the backdrop that we created this proposal. But for COVID, I would feel totally comfortable implementing it even faster than 5 years. But because of the pandemic, I think it's wise for us to be sensitive as to how do we do the ultimate phase in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purington.
Oh, there. That kind of brings up another question, but my original question, the follow-up with Jennifer and you, was we've never seen a cost of these, the insurance for the upkeep, encouragement violations. We've never seen any sort of a cost sheet on what even we're going after. So to me, it's just a shot in the dark that this is even how much money that you need. And then the other one, and now I just forgot what the other one was, but it was something that you were just talking about. And I can't remember.
Maybe I'll come back.
I hope. You never know.
Okay. Councilmember Joy, we'll be here. Councilmember Joy.
I will hold my comment because it's more for the discussion part of this than for the question part. So I will hold.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a reminder, we will open for public hearing soon, so people can be prepared to call 237-6196, but we haven't opened the public hearing yet. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I want to say that you captured it very well, and it's part for what I'm thinking about, because one of the things Jennifer said during the discussion was part of the reason we do this is to try and discourage the use of the public right of way. And, the market rate, I know, Jennifer, you came up in 14 a square. I believe, I think downtown runs anywhere from probably 13 to 18 if we're just talking about downtown, but we're talking about the whole city. So maybe that 14 is about right. And then to go to half of that, I think that's really a generous cut to kind of show that you're trying to just kind of discourage that use of the public right of way. And so, although that's for another discussion, if we want to continue the 7, I like the idea. At least we're starting out, and like Chris said, we don't want to hurt these businesses, but we also do need to update this since it's 85 still. But Chris, I think you kind of captured the way I thought this program would work. So,
thank you very much, Jennifer. Is a $10 minimum annual fee enough? That, again, if you got to send an email, it costs you more than $10. I don't know where that one came from.
Mayor Cole, it's hard to say. We with increasing the fees, there's actually very few that $10 minimum would apply to, and it really depends. Are they property owners that get that insurance in and there's no issues? Then yeah, absolutely covers. I think the average, we can cover those couple with a $10 minimum, but it really depends on the individual one.
Okay. Other Councilmember Purington.
It came back to me. So when these businesses encroached upon the sidewalk, isn't there a fee for whenever they do that?
That's what these would be.
No, I know, but I meant whenever but the encroachment goes annually. But I'm saying whenever they apply to move out into the sidewalk area.
Yeah, so that's the one-time processing charge. So,
okay.
Kevin Iflin has joined us and would like to comment there.
Councilmember Purington, I think what you may be referring to is in the downtown area, there is because they occupy parking spaces, they are, businesses are required to compensate for those parking that they are occupying.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we go to public hearing? Again, 237-6196 will be the number. Councilor Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. Once we get up to the $7 and it brings in more money, I think that the money should be used to beautify the sidewalks. Walk downtown once, and there's places wheelchairs would have a hard time getting across some of these sidewalks, and it could just be assessed to the properties that are paying the encroachment. I can't see where we'd want to be sticking a bunch of planters or things like that out there to cause more encroachments to people's access to the sidewalks. So, but the sidewalks do desperately need to be fixed in the downtown area.
Thank you very much. Other questions before we go to public comment? If not, let's open up for public hearing. Please call that number if you'd like to be heard on this issue of fees for encroachments. That number 237-6196. Please turn off your computer or your the sound to your television, because our meeting is about 1 minute ahead of what you're hearing. And just listen to the person on the other end of the phone. When you call 237-6196, we'll ask you for your name and address and ask you to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes. When we do come back to discussion, Jennifer, if you can just be prepared. I did suggest 3 specific changes And once it's appropriate to talk about motions, we can get into those details, but we can do that later. That number again, 237-6196. I think we've delayed now. Denise, do we have anybody who's called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I have no callers.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing time for this item and open up for further discussion. I saw Councilmember Yakowicz hand and then Councilmember Nice's.
Thank you, Honor. May I make the motion? Is that, Jennifer, you're looking for first motion on A and then a motion on B?
Yes, that's what we're looking for.
Okay. So I recommend, having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the resolution revising encroachment rentals fees for fiscal year 21 as recommended by staff.
Okay, the motion is for approval as drafted. I see some seconds. Councilmember Boyette. Okay, and I regret that when I opened it up for public hearing, I did not specify it was for both items. Since we haven't had discussion on the second item, I guess my inclination will be to still have a public hearing. I don't anticipate any comments, but on 10B at that time, but I was only talking about 10A. So anyway, the motion is for approval of 10A. The resolution is drafted. Discussion. This would be a good opportunity for me to ask Jennifer, the specific recommended changes I had to the language. I'm just going to go through those quickly. If you've got a copy of it in front of you, the first one was in the first sentence of section 1. It says encroachment rental fees. I was suggesting adding a sentence that says something like, staff may determine in its discretion the boundaries of the encroachment area, which may be larger than the physical dimensions of an item placed in the right-of-way. So my point there is that if somebody sticks a lollipop sign that is about yay big, the size of a grapefruit, in the middle of the sidewalk with a sign on it, the fee is going to be absolutely minuscule. But the degree of obstruction, now obviously you might not approve that in that kind of ridiculous example, but the degree of impact is not exactly just the physical obstruction, because people have to go around it. They can't use it right behind it. They can't use it right in front of it. So I'm trying to give staff the authority to define that obstruction area with that kind of language. Does that make sense to you? Do you have any concerns or problems with adding that language?
Mayor Cole, no, I don't have any concerns with that. You know, we haven't had any problems yet, but you are correct that we could going forward if we start increasing those fees more. We may want to consider, instead of staff, specifying city engineer may determine.
Okay. All right, well, that's the point. I will then just to move it along, make that motion to add that language. I can make my own motions. Is there a second on it? I see a second by Councilmember Nice. Discussion on that motion. Councilmember Nice. Councilmember Nice, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I switched screens before I unmuted. In reading your email, and I agree with you on this, I guess I would ask for Brent Brooks to weigh in if we can try to assess something like this outside of that, because your example of a pole is correct, but if you think about some of the sidewalks that are converted into patios, there's a much more bigger impact of not being able to utilize that sidewalk before and after that patio. So while I think that it's good, I don't know if the added value or benefit is there, other than it may be an additional deterrent because we're adding some area to the amount, so we, to try and keep the public right of ways open. So anyway, so even though I second your motion, I'm speaking to it because I'm not 100% sure I agree with that. I'd like to have Brent Brooks kind of indicate, can we actually assess for something outside of their encroaching if it's just not allowing you to pass in front of it or behind it?
Your Honor, and Councilmember Neese, I guess my short answer is yes.
Okay.
Under your self-governing authority, yes, as long as it is affecting the area involved in the encroachment, I think, yes, you do.
Okay, Marin, just another quick follow-up.
Sure.
Then, as Jennifer said, it would be the engineering taking a look at that. Does that mean they have to go to every single encroachment and then determine how much additional they need to add to each of those? Because they've got a lot already approved now. Does that mean we're going to have to review every single one? I can see the new ones going forward, but that means you got to go through all the ones on this list and change them out.
Your Honor, Counsel, I guess that would be a question for the mayor. If that was his intent, that could be very tedious.
Yeah, no, the intent is to give staff the discretion to do what is reasonable.
Okay.
So if they're satisfied, there's no need. If they think there's a problem, then they would have grounds to increase an area. Any other discussion before we proceed to a vote on that amendment? Councilmember Purington?
A couple of things. So, Bill, when you started talking about your little poll and everything, I got to thinking about the sidewalk sales and people putting sandwich boards out on the sidewalk, advertising whatever they advertise, and clothes racks and those sorts of things. Those are very temporary, maybe 2 days max, but I would imagine that there are some places, restaurants, that would use sandwich boards for specials or something. Are those included in this encroachment issue at all? Is that just completely separate? And that's one question.
But if staff can comment. Jennifer?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Purington, we do not include any of those in these encroachments. These are the more permanent ongoing encroachments here that we're talking about.
Okay, and then just to make sure that I understand, you're talking about just going from the $1 to the $2 fee this year, and that's for Tier 1, Tier 2, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess we're to the discussion point, and I would like to just say that I think there are some really interesting things that we could do in the public right of way. People who have walked down Montana Avenue and a lot of the businesses along Montana Avenue, and of course this area impacts more than just that small downtown area, but traffic calming. That's one of the things we've talked about. And Montana Avenue is one of those places where those businesses would really like people to slow down. I think there are some really good things we can be doing. I've eaten my ice cream on the sidewalk and had the pickups go past that were blowing coal. I think there's absolutely a lot of things that we can do in terms of traffic calming and the attractiveness of being in the downtown area that would pay a huge dividend to the businesses who are using the sidewalks. And I think that after this pandemic, however this kind of it goes, nobody knows. I think there's going to be huge demand for people being able to sit out on the sidewalk and chat and have a small table, and all those things I think will come back in a bigger way than they were before after we're past this pandemic. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on this motion before we move to a vote on this amendment only? If not, let's have a vote. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the amendment are Council members Boyette, Cole, Chiriki, Joy, Ewalt, Neese, Shaw, Yakowicz, and Ronning. If you're in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Council members Purington and Brown. Thank you very much. Second amendment I would propose, and this will be the final one in paragraph 1B. it defines a major encroachment as one that makes, quote, the encroached upon right-of-way unusable to the public. And what I would suggest, instead of saying the whole right-of-way has to be unusable to the public, that the words portion of the be added, so a major encroachment would be one that where the encroached upon portion of the right-of-way is unusable to the public. Because if I'm a lawyer and all of a sudden my client's got $3,500 that they're looking at, I would say just read your own ordinance. The right-of-way, people are walking around it. They can still use the right-of-way. It's not a complete block. It's only part of it that's blocked. So that's the reason for the language suggestion. Second, Councilmember Neese. Discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please raise a hand. Voting in favor, Council members Boyette, Cole, Chiriky, Joy, Ewalt, Neese, Shaw, Yakowicz, and Ronning. If in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Council members Purington and Brown. So that amendment passes. Now discussion on the amended motion. Councilmember Chiriky.
This is actually just more feedback. As we start thinking about the phase 2, or the not the phase 2, but the tier 2, we might want to be thinking in terms of how it's being used, encourage maybe usage during the summer that can be removed during the winter, things along those lines that take seasons into account. Thank you.
Good point. Some of these encroachments go away seasonally, but they're still assessed every month. Is that correct, Jennifer?
Mayor, Council, we do have seasonal encroachments where they actually go away during certain months of the year. So if they are up for 6 months and down for 6 months, they are only charged for half.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, discussion on the underlying motion for approval with those two amendments. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Boyette?
Yes, sir, Mayor. Excuse me. Was there a public comment that needed for this?
We had the public hearing on item 10A, which is what we're talking about. Yep. Okay, before we proceed to a vote, any other discussion? Councilmember Chiriky.
I would also add that I don't see this as a tax, or I see this more along as a fee. I see the city as basically being landlords of the right-of-way, and that businesses who want to use this space are basically paying us for the right of using our land. So I get that we want to be careful about, fees, and we want to be able to encourage businesses and whatnot, but we also want to make sure that the city is getting fair market value for the use of our property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Neese?
Just want to thank Chris and staff for taking the time to get this done. I think I asked for about this over a year ago, and so I think we're right on the right path on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, we'll proceed to vote on the amended motion. All in favor of approval of the amended motion, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are council members Boyette, Cole, Chiriky, Joy, Ewalt, Neese, Shaw, Yakowicz, and Ronning. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members Purington and Brown. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Now that concludes 10A. 10B is the actual assessments. Jennifer, would you tell us, and I'm not sure we've read, I don't know that we did officially read it, so let's ask the clerk to read item 10B. Denise, would you read 10B?
Yes, there will be a public hearing and resolution adopting the encroachment assessments for FY21. Staff recommends approval. Action this evening is approval or disapproval of staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. So Denise, or I'm sorry, Jennifer, the attachment that we have to 10B is the actual assessments based on what we've just approved in 10A. Is that correct?
Mayor and Council, that is correct. And I would recommend that you approve the resolution consistent with the rates you just approved.
Okay, is there any other staff presentation? I assume not, Andy? Nope, you're shaking your head, so no. Again, we probably could have combined these as a public hearing, but I didn't make that clear, so I'd like to reopen that when when you've had an opportunity to answer or ask any questions of staff. Councilmember Neese, did you have a question for staff? There you go.
Just a quick question, Mayor. Thank you. I see several of these, or a few of these here, that the minimum $10, Jennifer. One of them, several of them are actually then less amount. Is that because it's the same owner? So it's $10 minimum per owner. Is that I understand that correctly?
Councilmember Neese, what we did was a $10 minimum per encroachment. So there are different situations that we have where we split all of our assessments amongst, say, townhouses or different property owners. So that's consistent with what we do for all assessments.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Any other questions before we go to a public hearing and invite anyone to call 237-6196? Let's open the public hearing. Public hearing is then open for any public comment on item 10B, these specific encroachment fees. Please call that number if you'd like to be heard. To the number again, 237-6196. Reminder, our meeting is about a minute ahead, so please turn off the sound to your television or to your computer. Just listen to the person on the other end of the phone at 237-6196. We'll ask you to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Do we have, Denise, anyone who is called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I have no callers.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close then the public hearing on item 10B and open up to council for further discussion or motion. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the resolution adopting the encroachment assessments for FY21 as recommended by staff.
Second, Councilmember Tariki. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion before we move to a vote? If not, all in favor of the motion, which is for approval, please raise your hand. Voting in favor of the motion are Councilmembers Boyette, Cole, Tariki, Joy, Ewalt, Neese, Shaw, Yakowicz, and Ronning. Voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition, Council Members Purington and Brown. Motion passes. Thank you very much. That concludes item 10B, and that's the last item on our regular agenda. We'll now move then to public comment on non-agenda items. So please call in now if you'd like to comment on anything that was not on our agenda tonight. That number again, 237-6196. And as you've heard me say 10 times and are sick of hearing, please turn off your television or your computer because our meeting is ahead. And just listen to Denise, that nice voice on the other end of the phone at 237-6196. If you'd like to comment on anything not on our agenda, we'll ask you to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Denise, do we have anyone who has called 237-6196?
No, Mayor, I have no callers.
Okay. And then we will close our public comment period on non-agenda items and move on to council initiatives and adjournment. Do we have any council initiatives? If not, sorry we didn't get you in before 9 o'clock, but given that we had 10 items, I think it all went well. Thank you, everyone, for your time and efforts, and we'll see you in a week. Good night.
Thanks,
We are
everybody.
adjourned.